Wasn't paying attention and I went to Afros because that's where my daughter plays soccer. And realized about halfway there, I got just before the BMW, I said, no, that's not what we're doing today.
Like, how did I get there?
So it go to the place where you're afraid to tell you.
Oh, yeah, that's a great spot.
Yeah, it's just very rural.
Okay.
Okay, I'd like to call to order the Monday, March 10th, 2025 Board of Trustees meeting. Before we do public participation, I think we should go around the room. I'm Mark Kissinger, I'm board president.
Lisa Scoons, UHLS board liaison.
Sarah Patterson, secretary.
Bill Sacco, trustee.
Caroline Brancatella, trustee and co-vice president.
Sorry, CJ Goodwin, Swans Construction.
Michelle Walsh, trustee and co-vice president.
Lawrence Betta, trustee.
And Jeff Kirkpatrick, library director.
Thank you. I'm going to read a statement about public comment before we start. The board welcomes comment from the public related to board agenda items or library issues. This is an opportunity to share concerns rather than a question and answer period or a dialogue with the board or director. Speakers are encouraged to provide their full name and town of residence prior to addressing the board. In the interest of fairness and time considerations, comments are limited to 3 minutes. However, written comments may also be submitted. Additionally, members of the library community are invited to attend periodic board member office hours, which are published in the library's online calendar and newsletters. There's also a place on the library website that allows anyone to submit questions to the board. In addition, my personal email is mkissw2@gmail.com. And that's available for anyone that wants to submit anything related to the library. So now we'll go into public participation. Do we have anyone signed up?
Oh, I didn't get the
Sign up. I signed you in. So
You did?
yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, I didn't mark down anybody.
Okay, does anyone want to participate in public, the public part of the meeting? Okay.
Hi, my name is Bonnie Goldsmith Rooney. I live in Delmar. So I found this online from the Library Trustees Association of New York State brochure. It's entitled "Why Become a Library Trustee?" The duties and responsibilities of a library trustee include provide fiscal oversight, exercise fiduciary responsibility for the use of public and private funds, holds a position of trust to represent the best interest of the community. A library trustee works with the other trustees on the board and with the library director to make the best fiscal decisions for the library. Just stating here my opinion that you all failed to fulfill these important responsibilities by wasting nearly $2 million of taxpayer dollars prior to the $37 million bond vote. And I have been quite shocked that there has been no apology.
Okay, any other public comment?
Oliver Holmes in Delmar. Recently I attended your facilities committee meeting to learn about the possible renovations that you were thinking about in lieu of the failure of the board bond issue. And after doing that, and then actually having a short tour by the director, I'm looking at both your boiler and some of the lighting. I came to the conclusion, as an engineer who's done this work for a long time, that your boiler project really has an opportunity to save you a significant amount of energy if it's done properly. And I discussed that with the director this morning a little bit, as well as the lighting project that you can undertake. I think both of them can give you substantial short-term benefits in terms of energy and cost recovery. And I really encourage you to go forward with them, regardless of whatever other projects you may include in your list for that potential renovation. I think that you have an opportunity here that you can really pass up in terms of my professional opinion. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
Mark.
Sure.
Robert McDonald from Delmar. I have not always agreed with the board on all of your decisions and actions. but I do respect the work that you have done and your devotion to trying to accomplish what is best for the community. And I just want to indicate that I think you have accomplished that task. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, anyone else? Okay, moving right along, we're gonna go into building maintenance. Which is page 2, list of public potential projects. So TJ, you wanna lead us through that?
Sure. So, committee member is a document that I put together at the request of our library director. And so it's a very similar format to what I have presented before. I was requested or asked with putting together about 14 to 20-ish items that were priorities to your group. And what it might look like should you want to move forward with projects. And the way I did this, so before we sort of dive into each one, I was tasked with any of these could be their own thing. And so when you look at some as what we call as you escalate through this, it starts to grow. And I wanted to make sure that I address that it's that way, because if you pick one thing, I have to be able to cover some of the costs for things like attorneys and bonding and testing of those things as you go through that, which is why you see some of those items grow. Also, some of these items were not necessarily things you discussed with separately, is how I'll say it, when you talked about the larger project before. So good examples of that is roofing was always a discussion. So we had always carried numbers for that. I pulled a lot of that information from our previous estimates and updated it for this. Lighting is a different. We're always planning on replacing lighting, but now that we're not doing the larger part of the project and it could be its own standalone thing, it's sort of priced out here differently than if you were to grab an old estimate we did and compare the two. So the challenge of that is really making sure that I cover what is needed. If the group were to say, we like items 3, 7, 12, 14, and 5, I would go back through at that point and sort of tighten this up and try to adjust based on the combination of things, knowing there was more than one going to happen at once. So if you look at this and you go, it seems crazy that this number starts at 202,000, then ends at 473. You would be right in that sense, but the challenge of it would be is by the time you actually get done, if we just did that one thing, you will likely sort of land there anyway. And it's not so much that all the construction costs that much, it's all the details as you get to the end of it that still were never finished from before. Okay. That said, I was tasked with the number of items here. I would say 60-ish% of them were items that I copied forward and sort of adjusted based on no longer having any additions. I'll be totally honest with you, Jeff, I probably have about 4 hours into this, and our estimator probably has about 1. It really didn't take all that long. And so I'll just run through sort of quickly how the top of this works versus the bottom. So when you look at on the left-hand side, the work description, those are all of the items that I was asked to put numbers to. The base construction cost with overhead and profit is just what I would think those items are worth in a pre-bid situation. And then after that is, again, knowing that the design of these things in some cases has not actually even started, that I've escalated things to protect the library in this process, so we make sure we have enough. So where you see design contingency, that's our way of saying at 15%, we know they're not done. We need to make sure we cover some money to do that. And again, if some of those pieces are selected separately, that would help make up a little bit of that gap. It all kind of works together. Escalation hasn't really changed in terms of what it's for. It's for if this is to happen summer of 26, summer 27, summer 28. Typically, we provide escalation when we know whatever the construction timeline is, about 4.5% a year. So if we know that it's gonna be something that happens sooner, that number would come down or maybe disappear. If we knew it was something that was gonna happen 2 years from now, we would adjust it based on that. We just haven't gotten to that level yet, so that's why it's just a flat 15% right now. The next piece over is general conditions. We use that for things like during construction, for things we need that aren't construction related. So a good example of that is when you are doing an addition, I know there's none here. Protecting the addition, keeping people out of the addition, contractors having a place to store their materials and things like that. That's what general conditions is typically for. It's the things that support construction. And then where you see our construction total is, that's everything that we would expect from contract to construction that a contractor would bill for as their construction contract total. The next two lines are what we call our soft costs. And I've escalated those a little bit. Typically in most projects, if I know the timeline, I know sort of how much we're gonna do. Construction contingency would be between, 7 and 9-ish%. I push that up just because, again, we don't really know that timeline or what exactly we're doing. And that's for all the things that are not sort of thought of. We haven't opened up a wall yet. If we open that wall and find something that we didn't know we had to deal with, that's what that money is sort of for. The last line, the incidental, is for all the other things that happen on projects. Paying a designer, paying a construction manager, paying an attorney, paying for the seeker process, paying for insurance, paying for the bond rates and things like that. Those all sort of land in there. And typically we would run, if you looked at all of my other previous assessments, that runs about 22.5% usually is what we cover in a public project. That's much more now because as each individual thing may be its own project, I may need more cash to do those things. And the best way to explain it is if you were to do one thing, I have to basically plan for the testing of those things or the closeout of those things as what I think each one would take. As opposed to when we were talking about $30 million, saying this whole project takes this amount. Historically, we've been able to cover all those funds with 22.5%. So I know it looks probably fairly daunting on there. It probably may even upset some. They are not finalized things because really the scope isn't finalized. It's just really the starting point. Now that I've gotten that whole spiel out, you want me to go line by line?
Is there any way you can expand?
Excuse me.
We could,
No, excuse me a second.
oh,
This is a board meeting of which you
Oh.
guys are attending. If you have
Oh.
questions, you can ask them of me by
Okay.
email, but you're not, this is not a question and answer period. This is a board meeting of which you guys are in attendance.
I ask a couple of questions?
Sure.
I'm not clear why a design contingency is not in with base construction. If you bring someone in to do a boiler,
Sure.
they have experience to do the boiler, they're gonna look at your facility and they're gonna tell you what they need to do. Is that not design?
No, so
Okay, so I don't.
what you're saying is correct. You would expect that. So our process is a little bit different in terms of if you're going directly to a contractor and he's going to provide a price for that, yes. A lot of times how these work in my world is we're going to call an engineer, which I think you have an RFP out before now. They're going to come in and go, your boiler is this big, it should be this big. It has this much piping that has to be redone. Maybe it needs pumps now versus it doesn't have pumps now. He's going to design that process. Then I would estimate it.
And you go to the.
And then we would go to the contractor. I skipped the first part. I'm taking on the risk of, I have to make sure that whenever that engineer comes, that this is what he's seeing as kind of his starting point.
And those costs are, some of those costs are required because we are a government public building, correct?
If you're talking about like labor, because labor has to be prevailing wage, yes.
Or an RFP for an engineer?
Yeah, so I mean, you guys still have to follow a building permit process in
Okay.
most cases. You guys fall under SED, so that's a process I'm very familiar with. And so everything with SED has to go through their process. So but that part of the process kind of lands more in the incidental range because you're gonna pay the engineer to complete that process for you. or you're gonna pay us and the engineer to complete that process for you.
Thanks.
Absolutely.
So kind of a conceptual question, because I think it's important to compare what we're doing to what we might be doing.
Sure.
So you spoke a lot about how this is based on individual projects.
Right.
And if what I'm hearing from you, it's not a guarantee, but in many cases, you were to take these as 10 separate projects.
Sure.
And let's say you did one year, one the next year, that because you have to go through that very specific process
Sure.
of approvals and attorneys and such, every single time that those 10 projects together, add them all,
Yep.
is potentially more money than the idea of combining everything to do it
Yeah.
in one fell swoop.
Yeah, and there's a couple of reasons for it. So, when you do things at once, so a lot of things are the same. So when you call your attorney to do seeker and there's no site work and it's actually a pretty simple process at that point, there's a negative declaration. You know, you guys declare yourself the lead agent, blah, blah, blah. He writes all that paperwork for you. And it's really based on the library would like to do building renovations for X, Y, and Z and blah, blah, blah. They declare themselves the lead agent. A lot of those things get lumped together. So it still takes him an hour to do it. Whether it's 5 things that are different, but they're all in the same sort of category. Or if he does it 5 times, it may take him 5 hours,
Like buying in bulk.
right?
And then just a second question, because I know that we had a lot of questions about contingency in the
Yeah,
last project. And, you know, I think that a lot of us base some of our thinking about this in projects that we've done in our own lives. And I'm looking at some house projects as well, and the contingency and the escalation, and those are extremely,
Those are houses.
yes, but they are also, no, and I'm not comparing, I'm just saying that current market conditions or the lack perhaps of the ability to predict market conditions
Right.
have become a real, part of the discussion
Yeah, I
of
mean-
what I might be doing in 6 months. So I understand your high estimates, but I'm also for the higher numbers in those ways, but I'm also asking, how scary does it look 6 months from now
Well, so here's the other, like,
in terms of?
tariffs, let's just.
Exactly,
We're still working through our process internally of how we're gonna address tariffs because we still don't know. You know, we're hearing what they're saying. We're trying to follow through or talking with attorneys, economists, like all of that stuff. And even they still don't know because nothing's really happened yet. This whole document was kind of before that. And I still feel okay, you know, like I'm not panicked that if all of a sudden tariffs are realized and they are as bad as they say they may be for steel and things like that, that it will affect this. I do also feel fairly confident that I prepared for some of that. We may find that as things happen sooner, maybe they won't affect, or if we hit a right time, you might find some savings. This is unfortunately the first part of the process to the end that's over here. There's a lot of space in the middle and it's hard to predict all of it. But what I have to do is do my best to do that, to make sure that when you get to the end, you still have at least a dollar.
No, and I appreciate that, and like I said, I'm just making the point for the public that we have this document now. We're looking at it, that market conditions do affect this, so that if these numbers do look different in 6 months, that's not because
These numbers. will
they were
change.
wrong, it's because it depends on a set of conditions at a certain period of time.
And these are, when you estimate, they're exactly that. It's basically, I prepared based on what square footage I thought there to be, based on what had already been done in some cases. And in other cases, based on information that I gained, some existing information that the library provided from previous projects, I was able to use a little bit of that. But again, it's a snapshot in time. A designer could get to this stuff next and say, no, I think you need to do X, Y, and Z in addition to that. That's why design contingency is 15%, so that if they come up with that, that money should cover that.
Thank you.
Are there natural projects of these 14 that fit in groupings?
Yeah, Honestly, Mark, any of these could sort of be done with the other. I don't know, I forgot your name soon, I'm sorry, but I think what you're sort of alluding to is maybe an energy performance contract, which we did talk about where, a lot of times if you were to call a Johnson Controls or a Day Automation, there's a number of companies out there that do what they call energy performance contracts. They come in, they'll evaluate your building. A lot of times lighting is the greatest savings. And then you leverage what is basically the savings of the lighting in your monthly electric bill projected over time to pay for some other things. And so a lot of times you'll find that lighting, boilers, and then some other things, depending on how much you have, you can sort of leverage that together. SEV has a process for that. They have a payback you have to hit. It's a process that's been happening for probably 20 or 30 years, if not longer. But I will admit that each entity has their own feelings about energy performance contracts. There are certainly downsides to them. You're sort of looking for a guarantee of the payback. A lot of times also, if it's mechanical equipment, you have to sort of maintain it the way they said, or you start sort of manipulating what the actual payback is. Which sometimes on paper, 70 degrees doesn't feel like 70 degrees when you get into a room. So a lot of times that's part of that process. But again, they're really good processes. You guys, I think, will struggle a little bit. I don't mean to turn you off from it. You have a lot of lighting. I don't know that you have that much lighting, but that's not my expertise. But I can certainly get people here that could answer that question better if that was something you were interested in. Again, I would try to do anything abatement wise together. Get it done as much as you can. It's worth biting off the bullet for that. I think you'll find there's a lot of efficiency there. A lot of these sort of escalation items can come down at that point. That makes a lot of sense. Elevator, I think, would be an okay standalone until recently with all the co-op issues with SEV and with the judgment in Broome County and things like that. That might be a little harder, but it really depends. But a lot of times those are nice standalone projects because you get an elevator company that come in, they do their thing, they go. Pretty straightforward at that point. Outside of that, another good standalone would be roof replacement, even if it had abatement as part of it. A lot of roofing contractors can do the roofing abatement as well, depending on what the material is. They can usually get in, kind of get out. It's stuff that can happen sort of while everybody's around, as long as they're in certain spots and we kind of work through that process. And outside of that, windows, repointing, anything exterior envelope wise, I would try to do together. So I mean, truthfully, Mark, again, any of these things could package 5 of them. Pick your most important. I would think you would be okay. Not saying it would be perfect, but I think a lot of them would be okay.
The other question I had was, I don't understand number 10.
Number 10.
Heat and so.
Yep, so do you want to go or you want me to go? You go. So, oh God, this one's gonna get me. Do you want me to go? No, I'm gonna do it. There are some areas where there are existing heaters or need more heaters that are part of the existing rooftop equipment. Where they need either reheat coils is what we call them, where they would stick a new coil in the ductwork that would have hot water routed to it, or you can get electric ones.
Yeah.
That would basically, as air comes through from the outside, would heat that air and then dump it into your space.
So you were asking about natural things to go together. The reason the reheats on this side of the building, and I know how much you all love the talk HVAC, right? But everything on we don't have reheats on this side of the building. Reheats are all on the other, like the main library building, but over here, you can't get a pipe because of the asbestos ceiling. You can't work within 6 feet of the asbestos. You can't get a pipe above the ceiling, below the ceiling. It would cut you off the neck because that's where it would come back to the middle of the hallway. So in order, if you were going to do that abatement, replace the ceiling, that would be a natural time to run the pipes over from the boiler and install the hot water reheats in these rooms. And those help both with controlling temperature and the dehumidification, right? So there's not so much dehumidification problem in the main part of the library, but if you're in this side of the library in the summer, you'll notice it gets swampy over here, the doors stop closing, wood gets weird, the piano gets funky in the summer because of the humidity, and that's because you can't run reheats, so.
And then, I mean, some of the other ones you may have the ability to look at whether you need or not. I think one would be the sprinkler system. Like it or not, if we're not going to do anything to the building is still acceptable the way that it is. It's called an existing non-conformant. that whole piece really came up because we were doing all this work. You have to bring it up to current code, kind of in a situation where you're okay the way you are, you could stay that way. And then the other one I wanted to point, or other two I wanted to point out is, with, Borwick for the house removal. There's one line item in here that I carried. It's a pretty big line item. It's $50,000. And I did that because we weren't really sure if what is in that house that has to be abated actually has to be abated first and then knock down the house, or if we can knock the house down with all of that stuff and just throw it all out as hazardous material. That could change that number fairly drastically, to be quite honest. So once we were able to determine something like that, we took the worst case scenario, we could probably drop that number down or able to, however.
Where is that?
That's number, sorry, 7.
And where does that 50 grand? Where?
It's it would be in the first column, be part of that first 100,000.
What's that 100?
Right, so really that could almost be $50,000, it could be $50,000 right now. But we don't know if
Don't
that
know.
stuff can be the way that.
Yeah.
And then the last one was. Is the roof replacement with snow structural impacts. So before, when they were putting additions up in certain places, you were creating some snowdrift locations. So the structure as part of that was, I think, a little more robust than would it be needed now if you just were to do the roof as it is by itself. So I think we would take a closer look at that, but we would need an engineer to tell us what that should really be at that point.
With the roof, so you would take the roof down to
The roof
nothing? Is the asbestos under that? Is that, does that
I
give you
believe it's in
access to the
2
asbestos?
spots.
It's,
There's a layer of it underneath the insulation from what I read in the report.
From the roof,
That I think was a vapor barrier at some point from when it was a liquid applied roof or when it was a tar roof.
yeah. it's got-
And then I think there are certain spots around roof drains that have asbestos in the roof drains that we would probably deal with.
So we'd be able to do some asbestos abatement
Yeah.
while we replace the roof.
oh, and it's
You have
not, you'd have to, it's not,
Would it get all of it?
it would get.
It would get all the roof things.
Right,
Okay,
It
but
wouldn't
then
get
you also have
the, it wouldn't get that.
Okay.
but the roof drains are underneath the steel deck of the roof, right, because the pipe comes through the
That
roof.
was what I was trying to figure out.
Right, and so those joints are, yeah, it looks like more like what you consider the traditional asbestos, like kind of white plastery stuff that's around the joints. That's separate, but there's a whole layer in that roof that is above the steel deck and is like part is this mastic layer that's included in the roof outside the library, effectively above the steel deck.
And what's above the asbestos that's in the lobby area, in the general area, in the front? Which
Like
The
above
asbestos
the popcorn ceiling,
Yeah.
it's not, it's that ceiling and however it's, some kind of lattice that it's been applied to.
It's probably the popcorn texture itself.
Right,
Okay.
so once that's gone, once you have to take all of that out, it's the steel deck. The next thing
Of
above
the
is
roof.
pipes and stuff, it's the bottom of
okay,
the
that's
roof.
what, so it's all.
So you typically find asbestos in like floor tile is one, if you've ever seen a 9x9 tile in a
Right.
classroom, a lot of times. It's not the tile itself, it's the mastic below it. The other thing is ceilings. So the popcorn texture typically see, or if you see an older plaster that has that like orange peel texture to
Yeah.
it, that's typically has an asbestos in the plaster. Just because asbestos was such a good product before they knew it was so bad for you, they put it in everything.
Yeah.
I mean, they still mine it today for car parts, for exhaust flanges and things like that. They still mine it today. But they put it in everything from floor tile to ceilings to joints. So you kind of find it in 3 layers. You find it sort of in the things that you are most near, you touch. You find it above ceilings and piping and things like that, or on insulation. And then you find it typically in mastics on roofs or floor.
So it would make sense to group that together, the asbestos relief and the roof.
Yeah.
Really.
A question about the fire system and security system. I think that traditionally we have spoken about those two things in tandem, and I get that because they have a lot of synergies. So my question is just kind of telling off what you just said, that is the fire replacement necessary? If we do a security system, is it silly not to do a fire system and vice versa?
No, those I think are two independent things.
Okay.
They really operate separately. I would say your fire alarm system, to me, I think would be the most critical thing. Not saying you don't or shouldn't do sprinklers, not saying that at all. But in terms of the way technology has changed for fire alarms, I think it's more adaptive for people that are either deaf or blind. It bridges that gap way better than how the system probably is now.
No, and I think that's a critical distinction that you made, is that you spoke before about a sprinkler system
Yeah,
Not-
different,
being necessary, a fire alarm system
100%.
is necessary.
Right. I would definitely say because they're audible, so they are flashing and sound, so that if you are one or the other, you can see that. And then it gives direction, and I think like certainly have a lot of kids in here all the time, that helps in that situation. And that's a change that's statewide, it's a code change that happened in 2020. So,
Yeah, we have lights and sound, but we do not have.
right. And so that's the hard part, and schools struggle with this too, just so everybody knows, it's, you sort of budget for as much as you can and you deal with what you can, but, you know, they sort of let you go as long as you can go. And what ends up happening is it's harder to find parts, it's harder to find those particular things, or they stop selling them altogether. And then you're kind of forced into it. And so you just gotta kind of hedge that.
The house removal.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure we want it gone, but is it tied to anything else anymore? Is it tied, was obviously critical for the parking lot reconfiguration. But at the moment, it would just be a standalone thing, or is it connected to anything else right now?
No, it's there.
Right.
Right, that's it.
Just making sure.
Yes, gotcha. Yeah, it's not tied to the curbside pickup, which is what we were doing on more parking. It's not tied to any of this.
So I have questions, CJ. On, when, I'm just adding this, I don't have a calculator in front of me.
I calculated it for you.
There you go.
I debated on whether to leave
That's what I was-
take the total.
No, when I'm comparing number one, boiler replacement, which starts out at 222.
Sure.
And number 5A, mill and resurface lots, which is 239. And that's about a $17,000 difference.
How it gets to be so different at the end?
When we end, it's 400,000 and almost $1 million. Like, why is that such a great
You know, honestly, I
discrepancy?
didn't notice that. I'll double check this. No, I, that's a really good catch. I honestly didn't notice. I mean, everything sort of follows through fairly similarly, so I'm guessing I've got something messed up. So I will double check and I'll get back to the board. I apologize.
The other thing I wanted to ask is if we did a roof replacement, that negates the need for doing reheat. Is that correct? Because then you would be able to go through the pipe, no, you're shaking your head no.
No, because the reheat still,
No, because you still have the heat problem. You just haven't done it yet because you can't get the piping through because of the asbestos. You would have done it already if the asbestos wasn't in your way. You want the heat, but you can't because of the asbestos. So if you did the roof, well, your roofing insulation value would go up because you go from like 24 to 30. It's not gonna be enough to probably keep those spaces warm.
Okay, I guess I'm still not understanding. So the roofing, when it says including abatement,
Yep.
does that include the abatement that's right on the roof plus the one that's a little lower and closer to us?
no,
No,
It includes the one that's on the roof.
okay.
Okay, and
So it doesn't include the one that the pipes go through for the
And
reheat.
that I tracked separately as 2C.
Okay,
But that has nothing to do with the reheat.
well, I thought.
So there's different kinds. So there's a drain pipe for roof drains.
yeah,
And then there's heating piping that is supplying hot water to, whether it be a baseboard or it be a,
Wait, that piping is in asbestos, or we can't.
the pathway between your boiler and where the reheat needs to go, there's asbestos.
Right, okay, so I did understand that part.
Yeah.
So it's just the abatement, the word abatement wasn't for that particular section.
yes, yeah, basically
Okay.
there's, and it's confusing a little bit, but there's the roof asbestos, there's asbestos above the steel deck and the roof. And then this popcorn ceiling that everybody can see, that's the ceiling, it's well under the roof, that's a different, those are two
They don't
different.
necessarily have to happen together.
Correct. Yeah, but I mean, I think our roof still has usable life, it's not It's not that's not a critical need. If you were gonna say, Jeff, what's the most important thing?
There are also other options
Yeah.
too. So this was planned to take what's there off and put it back. So there are other, we could call, I think you have here, so now it's technically, maybe now I just changed the name. We could have them come on site and they could look at the roof. They probably won't recertify your warranty. But they may say, listen, all the insulation here is probably in really good shape. We could add another layer of insulation to get you to your code compliant piece, throw a cover board over it, put down a new roof membrane. It may be $20 a square foot as opposed to 45.
So we're already two layers of roof in.
Yeah.
Okay, so as long as you know that,
So the hard part there is you sort of trade the asbestos piece sometimes. So you gotta kind of decide which thing is most important.
The library monitor ceiling abatement, where is that?
So the monitor is the high section of the library that's above the information desk.
Okay.
The highest part of the roof there is the same popcorn ceiling that you have in the hall, but it's way up there. And actually the things that put me in a cold sweat, that's one of them. Like I'm sure there's people that are just used to working that high. We don't ever go up there. So because it's so high, we don't do that. So it's up there. Need to be dealt with someday. It's encapsulated. We
But there's nothing, none of these projects touched.
Yeah, there was.
the library monitor ceiling.
Right,
2D
but-
is there, correct.
To
Nothing
do
there's-
any of the other projects would touch. that.
Correct. There's no
Yeah.
piping up there. The only things that are up there is the lights and they're all, I mean, we've never, in 25 years, I've never touched that high ceiling. Yeah, thank you. We haven't had a leak. We haven't had a weird leak or some strange drain. It doesn't mean that it couldn't happen, but it's a thing that exists and it doesn't want to be ignored because it's so, this ceiling out here can be touched by humans because I've seen it happen, right? So this is where people are carrying something, they got something, they're putting up a sign, they brush up against the ceiling. That's a much different thing than 50 feet or 65 feet up in the air. I don't know how that thing. But
Personal opinion, I would remove asbestos any chance you get. Just is the nature of liability at this point. That's probably one spot, if you didn't feel like you had to, you probably don't have to. There are also a million different ways to leave what is there, it's in sound condition, and still replace lights without disturbing the asbestos. Again, I would prefer to remove all of it everywhere, but sometimes that's not the.
And when we replace windows, it doesn't include those.
Right,
Or
you would
does
be able to, or you'd have to do it in a specific way so that you could. And maybe that's just removing a foot by the window, having them put like a tapeable edge on what stays, and then putting the window in and just patching that one area. That happens, truthfully, it happens all the time. Again, I wouldn't prefer that, I'd just rather get rid of it. By that time, you probably won't spend that much more.
I had a question on number 9, the carpet replacement, is that the whole building?
As much carpet as I could find on the drawings is what I replaced. I also plan on removing the stacks in that number as well. And there's like, 1,300 linear feet of stacks or something like that. It's a lot. It was way more than I thought it was, to be honest.
Yeah.
So I did my best to take into account of that, and honestly, again, not knowing where this would kind of land and not knowing maybe stacks will change, try to overshoot, a reasonable amount.
Sure. Okay, so I'm gonna repeat that back, see if I understood.
Yeah.
So in the carpet replacement number, the 350.
Yep.
There's also a factor for removing of the stacks, and the anticipation is that we would replace every piece of carpet that's in the building.
Yes.
Which is what we did the last time.
in 2003.
Right.
Yes, with the exception of the carpet that's upstairs on the mezzanine. It's the newest
Well,
carpet. It's the newest carpet.
Been
That's
on the
the
drawing.
It's weird
It wasn't
looking.
there.
Am I correct in assuming the blue column is the green column plus the 2 columns
Yes.
to the right of it?
Yes.
Okay, CJ, I'm sorry, but
You're okay.
a lot of.
Green
a lot
column
of
has been
complex.
published in the most
Okay.
pages.
The errors that result are because the total that's in the green column has been doubled before the next two columns are added in order to get the
Oh, did you
blue
figure
column.
that
That is the error that persists throughout this chart.
Other than the terrible embarrassment, right?
Yeah, sorry about that, but it helps me a little bit to know that they're not quite that expensive.
Yeah, I'll go back and double check what happened, and see why. I mean, it really should be. The 10% construction should be 10% of the first number, and then they get added together. So I'll have to see if I messed up my formula somewhere, or if I picked it up myself.
Gotcha. Well, the 10% numbers look correct.
They do, everything looks good except for
Yeah.
education.
I redeemed myself.
Okay, any other questions from CJ? Or related to building maintenance?
I have a question that's only tangentially related to this, but is related to my my engineer slash architect RFP. So I've talked to PJ about this a little bit and to Bob Schofield, who's from White Mountains, Montana, about this a little bit, and you both saying the same thing about specifically the boiler replacement, which is what my current task is, get working on that. So can you talk a little bit about having an architect involved in a project that is effectively an engineering?
Anything architectural related. So I spent about 15-ish years before I started at Schoolhouse doing K through 12 design work as a designer. And I spent most of that time submitting projects to SED. It's a process. It's like any government agency. They have 25 documents that you have to fill out, have signed, have stamped, and send in. I don't know that I've ever seen any engineering firm do that. I'm sure they very well could. And I'm not saying that they can't. It's just a process that if you're not familiar with, may drive you crazy, because it's not so much just the paperwork, it's all the stuff that they want in addition to the paperwork. So good examples of that are, they're gonna want a copy of seeker regardless of what you're doing. They're gonna wanna know you and your attorney went through that process. It's gonna ask for that, it's gonna ask for that document, it's gonna ask for the dates. If you're not familiar with those or how to fill out the paperwork, that might be a bit cumbersome. They're gonna ask for the resolution. When the attorney wrote the resolution, they're gonna ask for your certified vote tally from when you did the vote. If you don't literally read every piece of what they're asking for, they just keep kicking it back as you're missing this, or you're missing this, or you're missing this. So 99 out of 100 times, I'm willing to bet the architect has done those things on all projects. If you find an engineer that can, it's likely that they probably work with architects and they're doing it together in the background. Or you have one of the few that just understands the process or has done anything into it. When I worked at CSR as that person, there would be a number of projects that would show up sometimes like, hey, we just got to do the paperwork for this. And I'd be like, what do you mean? It's like, well, it's just a boiler, or it's just replacing mechanical equipment or whatever. They're very atypical. And what I think I left with you is, if you get engineers that question that, you'll know your answer. If you don't, then I'd say they're ready to go and they can do it. If worse comes to worse, I can certainly help any of those people. That's not a big deal. They would just have to obviously be liable for what they're doing at that point. So I've never seen it. I'm sure it can be done. Is that the best political answer?
That's a good answer. No, thank you. I just, as we're talking about that, so we were looked at RFP, I was last month charged with getting that out the door. And my pause was just having these two streams of information, both of them saying, because of the SED process, typically.
It's things that you have to pay an architect to do this one thing.
Right.
And a lot of times they're the contract holder.
Right.
I don't know why, like, you would think that why can't an engineer just hire him? That has happened before too. And I guess it's really up to whatever Bob thinks is most appropriate, whatever you guys are most comfortable with. That.
Do we have to redo seeker? Is our seeker for the building project good for these items?
It wouldn't be good for all of these, right? It's not gonna be good for all these, because many of these things that are identified here weren't part of the project and so weren't included. If we were gonna do
It's not.
What?
The boiler was not.
The boiler wasn't. Whether we can reuse the seeker, we're gonna ask the attorney that question. It's not a Jeff question. I don't know the answer to that.
Oh, we don't have the answers to that yet.
And I would recommend you ask.
Clarify that statement for the public and those listening. These are not new concepts. These were almost all of these were addressed
Right.
in the previous project holistically. But now they are being addressed. Again, we go back to that point one by one. I just want to make sure for the public that they were not new things,
Right.
new concepts, new ways of addressing those concepts. So for example, we were not replacing the boiler in the building project, the previous building project, we were looking at a geothermal project. Or the carpet was part of a more holistic project. So I just want to
100% correct.
make that clear for the public.
Well, because one of the things we heard from a lot of the public was, they were interested in looking at what are the maintenance items, what are the most important maintenance items? And I was tasked for, to put those together, and, a lot of these things have been on, go back and look at our long-range plans. I mean, you've been on the board long enough. Many of these things, it's not the first time you're seeing this because they were on our list. They were to be addressed, like you're saying, holistically. And now we want to pull them out and take a look at them individually and then get a concept of what are the scale of these.
So for better or for worse, Seeker was looking at a holistic project,
Correct.
and now Seeker has to look at them.
And the exact
In
question.
some cases.
Right.
individuals.
The question is, can we, having done that seeker process, can some of this be that tiny little bit? Don't know the answer to that question. That's definitely an attorney question, so.
Just wanted to add about the parking lot renovation.
Yeah.
I think we talked about possibly potentially working with the town on
Absolutely.
some of that, so I think that's something that maybe would help save a little money.
Yeah, and that's not an SED project. We're not. It's just a replacement in kind of like when we did our house, right? Some of these projects are simpler from an administrative weight way. They're just complicated because you have to mill and resurface the parking lot, right? And if you're not moving the parking lot, you're not changing anything, you're literally just in kind replacing the asphalt. With not something that's currently made out of coal patch, which is on some of our, right now, that's what they're created from.
You're not removing.
Yeah.
all- Taking out 2.5 inches of what is a 4-inch depth.
So those projects are gonna be a little bit easier, like the lighting project. That's depending on how you choose to move forward with lighting. Are you replacing the bulbs and not the fixtures? Like that's
Drivers, sometimes, a lot of times. A lot of energy performance contracts do a lot of bulb replacement. If the fixtures aren't in good shape, they replace the driver, replace the bulb, or they insert a LED fixture inside of that existing house. You take all the guts out of it and stick in a new fixture. And then a lot of times it's 1-for-1 at that point, because that's how National Grid writes their rebates at that point. Doing that change of fixtures, either less or pulling down your lots.
Who's done with the building?
Well, I have a question. Does anyone have any further questions before we go? Okay, so, yeah, we're talking about the status of the building.
We talked a little bit about this at among the executives, the vice presidents and Jeff, Jeff and Mark. We've all been doing the building project for a long time. And really what we boil down to right now, and we don't have the information, all of the information to make a decision yet, is whether we are going to put out a new bond to address some or all or some combination of these issues, or whether we are going to address these issues ad hoc, whether we're going to see if the operating budget can handle them and do them one or two at a time. We don't have even close to enough information for that. But we do have a number of things in play. We do have this RFP out. Obviously, CJ has worked. Thank you for this is great information. We've kind of put together our list. You're going to be refining the financial information in that. We've also reached a critical juncture in terms of the board, and that right now, our board year goes from July to July. So at the beginning of, as of July 1st, we will have at least one new board member. And a lot is to be determined, you know, the budget will have passed by then. We will have more information about perhaps budget moving forward, about the pilot project, things like that. I'm getting ahead of ourselves, but this all kind of leads to the point of kind of saying to the public, we've put a number of things in play. And saying that it really boils down to these two decisions, bond, ad hoc, and that decision is likely best left to the next set of trustees as opposed to us. And I think, you know, I just want to set up a timeline of some kind for the public. This is not going to be addressed for the next election. That this is something for the next board to decide. And I wanted to just put that up for discussion. Because as a trustee, I've been getting a lot of questions about when are you gonna make a decision? When are you gonna make a decision? And I think that we owe it to the public to, I don't think we're in a position where we can put a timeline, but we can put some parameters around it. We can put some, you know, just some rough idea of what's coming. And also this board has worked very, very hard on this particular project. And I think it's time to let the next set of decisions come into play and maybe not have a building committee on the agenda for one meeting so that we can address other important library issues.
So just so I'm clear, you would like us not to,
I'm asking, I'm putting that out for discussion. I want to hear what everyone says. I'm proposing that. I'm just wondering what everyone thinks or what other parameters we can, not parameters, but what other kind of guideposts we can give to the public about what's coming next. Because I think that not giving them that is creating a sense of agita, both for them, for the people who are very interested in this, and to some extent for us, because we feel the pressure of people saying, what's next, what's next, what's next? If we create a guidepost, then, you know, the public has expectations of us and we know what expectations we have to.
okay, because I'm hearing two different things though, that we need to decide if we want to go for another bond with several projects, which we have already decided will be cheaper than doing each one incrementally. If that was the point of your question earlier.
No, I don't think that we've decided that yet.
Okay.
I don't think that there has been a decision to move forward, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that there has been a solid decision to move forward with a bond. As
No,
opposed to-
okay, so perhaps decision was the wrong word to use. We've determined that it will be less expensive to group them rather than to do them incrementally. So it sounds like we need to make a decision moving forward. Do we plan to move forward one way or the other? Group them or do them incrementally? And then secondarily to that, are we gonna do that now? Or are we gonna wait until we have a new board, which really, I mean, I would point out, it's just one, possibly one new member, maybe two, which would not change
Depends
a
how many
majority
people I make
vote.
angry
Hopefully
between
just
now.
one, but but that wouldn't change a majority vote, I guess is my point. Two new people. So which is it that you want to address first?
I want to say to the public that we have to make a decision about one of those two things. And I'm not saying that we're making that decision, but that is fundamentally the decision we have to make. Bond or one at a time.
I mean, so we've talked a little bit about maybe pursuing like a next May bond. If we punt this, which is kind of what it is for a couple months, yes,
2026.
what did I say?
You said next May. I just want to be super quick because we're not to May yet.
Yes.
That's important.
I mean, I'm practically in May already.
I understand, me too.
2026. We know how long these things take, and every month that we delay puts, you know, creates that stress and bottleneck at the end with the, you know, we have to approve it, the Board of Education has to approve it. I feel like, yes, hopefully there won't be too much change on the board, but it feels like we have a good amount of information to at least advance this discussion, like continue to advance the discussion rather than almost pause it until July. So I mean, I would suggest at least continuing the conversation. I have a much better handle on things after CJ has walked us through that. I mean, I feel like we have a good amount of information and we can have a productive conversation.
I don't feel that we've really talked about what we need. I mean, we bounced from the bond referendum, which was large and did not pass, to just looking at repairs. But there were other aspects of our design that we need to talk about. Do we want to do something with the children's space? I'm not saying that we need to like change the walls, but do we need to take a look at that space if we're going to be lifting up carpeting and lifting up book stacks in terms of how that space is configured? Or do we want, if we're reconfiguring, do we want to make a more accessible for the teen space? We haven't, part of our responsibility is to try to serve the needs of our 28,000 people. And our statistics show over and over again what the demand is for the children's space and the children's room and how crowded that space is. So I'm not saying we need to have an expansion but if we're going to be doing all of this interior work, I think we need to step back and talk about some of the programmatic things, not just the repair things. I don't actually care when we do it. I just think it's going to be hard to do it before the next May election.
But I think you're getting into the conversation that got us to a $37 million project. And that's I don't disagree. There was a whole conversation on Facebook. And dozens of comments about how there's a lack of a warm, safe space for middle schoolers and teenagers to go after school. And I really wanted to be like, the library. I don't disagree, but this total, well, okay, it might not be the right total, but it's still, I don't feel like there's the appetite from the public for another $20 million project.
I'm not saying we need.
But I think it will quickly get to that if we do a few repairs and something nice. I don't know, I'm concerned about delaying the bare necessities for the library too much longer. I don't disagree. I would love to do something more public facing for the community, but I feel like the message was loud and clear that there isn't the appetite for that right now.
That may be true, but if we're picking up all the book stacks, we don't have to put them back down in the same place.
But sure, I think getting a little too into the weeds when we don't need to get there yet.
Okay.
Like, because we just need to decide, are we doing all the projects separately or are we doing them as one thing? And I guess if we decide we're doing them, either way, we can still make some choices later, I think. Like if we're doing them separately, we can make a separate choice to improve the children's department. And if we decide we're doing it all together, then once we make that decision, then maybe we can have a conversation about if we're picking up all the stacks, what can we do incrementally to improve this area? But yeah, that's too specific. Right now, we need to just make the
carpet that looks like a treasure map or something.
yeah, right.
So, Laura, sorry, Laura, I tend to agree with you that personally, I think we have enough to kind of move the decision forward. I guess kind of my bigger point is that the bond is a bond, or these decisions are a ton of work. And I think everyone at this table really knows that. And I think if we're going to commit to making those decisions, we need to continue full throttle at that. If we're going to say, let's do it, let's do it. And I guess what I'm asking is if the board is committed to moving forward with all of that through July and saying, okay, we're doing this, we're having the meetings, we're doing the things, and then deal with any new thoughts that may come in July and remain committed. So I mean, I guess the crux of my question is a commitment issue. Like, do we have it in us? Do we have the gas in the tank to keep doing this right now? Or and more importantly, do we have the gas to keep doing it through a little to your point, Michelle, not a majority change, but a potential, change of it all. I think that those are things to consider.
I feel like I have to say the one exception to that I brought up at the last building committee is boiler. We have to do the, like, regardless of what happens, we have to do the boiler.
Well, we knew the boiler 5 years ago.
Right.
I mean, it was almost, we were ready to go on that and then we
Because it
delayed that
doesn't
because
matter
it was-
which way we go, we still need a boiler so we can get to where we're going.
Correct. Gonna need a boiler. I mean, absent.
Well, so to that point though, we don't have the chart up anymore, but that first line on the chart, that was correct. So, and we don't have that much in reserves to pay it ourselves, so how would we?
We do.
Yes.
And we also have a construction grant like applied for, which we should.
So we could
potentially use.
And when,
I guess I sort of thought that that was, I don't know, maybe a conclusion that we had kind of come to, is that like, that the boiler
Me
needs to
too.
be done, that's the end of that story. And then we're making this other decision for everything else,
Right.
because that has to be done. And I just wanna say, like, I agree that I think we don't wanna wait, stop, or push it off. Like, my feeling is we need to keep going. And if we get new people, or we certainly will have a new person, we'll see what happens when that comes.
Do you think, again, I'm just going by questions, I'm trying to address all the questions that I'm getting. And do you think that we could say publicly that there will be no bond, there will be no decision on whether a bond happens or not? Or what do we,
I think you say when the decision's made, we'll announce it.
You can say there'll be no bond before May of 2026.
that's what I'm asking, is like, can we set some dates
I
of,
don't think, can't imagine there being something
I-
before May.
It would be
it's not possible
It's
for us
impossible.
to put a bond vote out before May of 20.
Yeah, it is. It's
and
just not
I'm
like-
asking to say that definitively and publicly.
I've been saying that to people, I mean.
I mean,
I've been saying
I
to
think we
people.
can, I think we can say that we want the public input on all these things, obviously, and there's no way that there's board support for having a bond prior to 2026, if we do have a bond. I mean, the special election that we had was chaotic, I would say, just the operation of it, and I would say we would, that's something I would not advise we do. I think we should roll it into the regular school election times. So, I mean, my position is that the boiler is separate. I agree with you. We should do the boiler. We should get the RFP out there, get going on it. The rest of the stuff, I think we need more discussion on and we should package it together. I'm not convinced that we need a bond. I'm not convinced either way, frankly. So I think we need to hear from the public, and also I think we need to figure out of this, is this the list? I mean, there's other things too, but this is the list this is the first draft of the list.
Right, because, and that's okay, because the parameters of this list isn't everything that needs to happen to the library ever. It
Right.
certainly doesn't address what the public said we needed to do to the library. None of those questions about where the teens are gonna hang out has nothing to do with it. But we wanted to there was a question that kept coming up that said, if we were doing maintenance on the
Right.
building, what would that look like, right? They said, strip all that stuff out, what's left? And it's still a significant project just for the stuff that in the next 5 to 10 years is gonna have to happen to the building. Some of the stuff like a roof replacement can be delayed, can move along, however, but sooner or later, the chickens are gonna come home on the roof and the roof and the roof will need to be replaced. The carpet has to get replaced. We're already to duct tape.
Right.
So I don't love duct tape. The maintenance guys are trying to match the duct tape to the color. They're trying to do the best they can, but it's a thing, right? So,
So, we may not even have agreement or a decision by the time new terms start. But I think we should keep going and having a discussion.
I do think there's people out there who think, one, that this upcoming election is a new bond. There are some people who think
Yes.
there's gonna be a bond in the fall. There are some people who think we're gonna do another bond in December. And there are some people who, you know, who think maybe that what are comporting with the timeline that we're on. And I'm just saying that I think we need to set some public expectation there, because without us saying something definitive, it just allows everyone to just run wild. So I think the conclusion of this very roundabout way is that we have not made a decision on a bond yet. We do not intend to put up any bond for vote any earlier than May 2026.
Could we put that in like footnotes or something, like update from the board?
Yep.
On the building project, on the website,
Yeah.
just
Yes,
put
that's a
some
good
update,
idea.
do a social media post, I'll share it. We
So
can put it on Nextdoor, which I haven't been back to.
So for the purposes of tonight's meeting though, do you need any other decisions from us, Jeff, for moving forward with the boiler?
Well, yes, the question is, right now, I've written the RFP to be an engineer, or an RFP for an engineer that includes making the submission to SED. Both CJ says that's not usually the way it's done with SED. It's mostly an architect. I had a similar conversation with our attorney, and he said, yeah, as weird as it seems that they need to design this is the way these projects go. Mostly it's coordinated by architects. So my question, I guess I need is, do you want me to rewrite this RFP so we're putting out or similarly scoped project with an architect as the lead designer, even though much of the project will in fact be designed by an engineer, because it's an engineering heavy project. There will be architectural components of this, because it's not simply take a boiler out, slap another boiler on, because of the asbestos and the flue that goes up through the roof. And there are some other architectural changes that might need to happen with that boiler room if you're touching it. Some makeup air and other things that no one cares about. So is it on these two streams of advice that I have, it sounds like what I had prepared was not the thing that is normally done with libraries. Not impossible, but ought I put that out as an architect? The similar scope, but including the architect as the lead designer, because they're the ones that are gonna have to run through the SED process.
I would say both, honestly, and probably not gonna do this, but I would say we can put an RFP out for architects and or an engineer.
Okay,
And then you get the best of both.
Okay.
And just be very clear about, what the scope of the project is, includes submission to SED.
But there's nowhere SED is saying, we require you to use an architect.
no, in fact, we've done an SED, so what CD was saying, it's really unusual. Our HVAC project the primary designer was the engineer. Those of you who remember that project, but the SED wasn't the particular challenge in that. So it is possible to do this, it's just not normally how those are done, so. But if we're gonna go with an engineer as the prime, it's not prime, it's not a prime contractor, it's not a contractor, but the primary designer, I think we need to be very clear, and maybe I'll seek some advice from our attorney and some other places to write that in a way that it's super clear, because we do not have the expertise in-house, right, being that it's me, to run
Could
that.
you bid it, could you put the RFP out and said, here's what we want done,
Yep,
an engineering firm working with the architect can bid, or an architecture firm working with the engineer can bid. Like, there's, schedule A, schedule B, it's either way.
Yeah.
They have to work together.
right, because you're gonna have, you're gonna have both,
Yeah.
you're gonna have both, so
And when you talk to Bob about the seeker.
Yeah.
Well, if we need to do a new seeker, we can go down the list and find out if we can group. If we can help, if we do a sleeper, if we have to do for each project, or if we can group
right.
a few projects together as we were speaking of, so we're not doing seekers over and over.
Right, and it may be because of the nature of this particular project, if it even requires seeker, it may literally be, well, because we did it for the HVAC project, it is literally the least involved, because you're not even disturbing the ground, there's no it's all inside the library. So it may be the simplest secret, in which case it may just be like, not even worth it. This process is so simple and small.
Okay.
But I will find that information for you and I will get that to you. You bet.
Secret's a pain in the neck.
It is.
Won't take that personally, because the DVC.
It's just that you have to go through all the different agencies.
Maybe there will be secret. Oh, that's right. There's no more news.
Okay, anything on building maintenance, status, or boiler replacement? Or move on.
Well, sorry. So is the plan to move forward and have like another full board building committee meeting or?
That's just, we should talk about that. So the way the building committee is populated is the whole board. It was on purpose because we were discussing a big project. We could populate the building committee with less on the board, or we could keep it with the whole board. People also should realize they don't have to come to every committee meeting. I know people want to, but I know people are very busy, so as long as they find out what happened. But I can go either way on that one. I went to the board for advice on that. We could do smallish building committee, or we could keep the building committee and the whole.
I like the idea of the open invitation. Anyone can come to the committee meeting,
Yeah.
but there is less of an obligation because we aren't doing that large building project.
Yeah.
At this point. So that's my 2 cents.
So is that keeping the whole board on it, the open invitation? Okay.
With less of an obligation.
Someone has to show up, like, someone has to show up.
Well,
We have a quorum, right?
Yeah, I think having the whole board at this point is a good idea until you get to a point where it looks like there's some agreement. And then maybe you come up with a smaller committee that's moving stuff out.
Yes, I agree.
Okay.
yes, I like that idea too.
Yeah, do you have any thoughts on that?
I'll go with whatever the board wants to do.
All right, Carolyn, any thoughts? Okay, so my sense is we're gonna keep the whole board as the building committee. And we'll get a meeting going. We'll set up a couple meetings, so we have.
Yeah.
So we'll look for.
So we're gonna set CJ loose.
I think so.
Free, send it free.
No, and we will, so if you get me an update to that, will get that corrected in the board package. I did have a question from the public about that, so awesome. And we'll get that corrected in the board packet and get a new one out there. So thank you. I appreciate it. It's great, very helpful.
Explain things very simply.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving on to the. Thank you. The next item is a review of previous meeting minutes, pages 436. If there's any questions on the meeting minutes, I will take them, or I'll take a motion.
I had a small correction I already put in, which is at the end, under the policy committee discussion. There's something that it said I said, but I actually just asked a question, I didn't say it.
Any other questions or?
I have that. Kristen, do you have that?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, you already, sorry, thank you.
All right, I'll make a motion to accept the previous meeting's minutes.
A second.
Michelle and Sarah, all those in favor, signify by raising your hand. Aye. Motion carried. Okay, moving on to the financial report, pages 7 through 16, treasurer's update on page 7.
All right, so I'm Sherry tonight, playing at Dime Store Sherry. So here we go. Got our expenses are under budget by 4% compared to about 3% this time last year, so we're doing okay. The salaries, once again, is the same as last month. Our salaries are closer to the budgeted amount because we're closer to fuller staff and there's been very little turnover, which is fantastic. In the packet, you've got the draft budget. That'll be one of the things we're talking about right there. It's got a levy limit increase, the PSEG pilot, which is now called GP2. Nobody cares. That's been extended for another year. And there's continuing negotiations to see if there'll be a longer term pilot agreement. So this is the levy limit, which the levy that's proposed in the budget is on top of that we get to the budget. And then the fund balance as of June 30th is this 3,928,000 minus again that the 1.5-ish million that we need to run the library for a quarter of a year, which you all know about, but I like to explain to the public. 1.3, she says there, has to come out of that. So, again, we are in good shape. We will bring the budget, we'll bring everything in under budget this year. Handily, though closer to the actual budgeted total post-pandemic, so.
So I'd like to just highlight the one sentence that says this budget does not include any new positions or significant adjustments to supplies or services. I think that's a great way to move forward with our budget as we go to vote.
Are you worried about any price increases coming?
Yeah, I mean, as
Sorry. Go ahead.
we can talk,
We're just gonna stare at each other, because I was gonna say, in COVID, books became very expensive.
Yes.
Getting books on time, getting books in the proper form became very, very expensive.
Yeah.
Do we anticipate any of those things?
so those are baked into our budget proposal now, that kind of increase. As always, and we can talk about this again when we get to the budget, the risk for us, the things that I'm concerned about long-term are healthcare increases because they're largely beyond our control and they just exist out in the world. 2 would be increases in the New York State retirement contribution if the economy were to shrink in some way, if there's recession, then those costs go up, right? And that's not a cost that we can escape or get out of. We are a participating member of that system. So I mean, every government would have the same issue, but those are, if you're saying what are the numbers that are the riskiest in the budget, those are it. We have tight control over, we know what the staffing size is. We're not anticipating any increases. We know exactly what the size of staff needs to be. The books are under our control largely. You can always have a wild swing in National Grid or something like that, but it's not enough to move the percentage needle. The risk is healthcare and the retirement system. So I'm comfortable. I think we're in good shape, and we've been getting very good. Sherry has been very good at investing our money as wise as we can under the constraints that we do. She's done a very good job. And if those interest rates were to come down, which I don't anticipate, then that would affect the amount of income that the non-tax income that we get based on the fact that we have a high interest rate situation.
In the event of a recession, we invest, again, this is from the public, we invest our money with a guaranteed dollar return for every dollar invested in CDs and government treasuries.
We are.
So if all of a sudden the stock market tanks, we are not in a position to lose money, correct?
For government agencies like us, protecting principal is the highest concern above getting a high rate of return. We're not here to make money on our investments. That's not what library or any government does. Our job is to protect principal. And so you're correct, CDs that are collateralized, right? So they're even more guaranteed if it's beyond the scope of the FDIC. Government-backed securities like treasury bonds, and then some other more exotic things that we don't typically get involved in. So correct, principal protection, even our accounts where we have something in money market account, and some of them are above the FDIC limit. We are required to have that in a collateralized account so that if the bank were to fold, the library wouldn't be out that, or hopefully wouldn't be out that money. So yeah, principal protection, the most important thing. Like don't lose money at all. If you can invest it and get something, fantastic. Why would you not do that? But it's not what we do. Thank you.
So I would just add to that, I wasn't gonna, that I thought, I'm going to say it. I just think that's another way in that we are being good trustees of taxpayer money, and that we're protecting the money that we do put in, and even though we aren't supposed to, or not, even that we don't expect to gain any surplus from these investments,
Right.
we are a little bit.
Yeah.
And so that's a benefit, and it's a benefit to the library, and that's good work.
So I think that bring a really great point, Michelle, that not enough people are aware of. And I think that, maybe as we head into the budget vote, I think that it's worth maybe putting something out there to the public, either through the footnotes or through a letter to the spotlight that highlights, I think, three particular things, and you hit on one of those points, is one, I think explaining why we have reserves. You know, you mentioned, and all of us know that we have that 1.5 million that we need for 6 months out of the year. I think we explain that, we explain what else do we use reserves for, you know, the catastrophe, the other things that, so, and then I think the second prong maybe is what are the most fluid parts of the budget? What are the things that we are scared are going to go up and the things that are unpredictable? And I think, you know, retirements are a big part of that one of the reasons we have reserves. And then I think, Michelle, your point is that since we made the decision several years ago to bring on a professional treasurer, and that decision has literally paid off in hundreds of thousands of dollars through her investment strategy. That frankly, I mean, I don't know if a board would not have the expertise on that board without the professional treasurer to do so. So I would like to propose that one of the board members put something up to draft to get out there before the next board meeting to explain how we are meeting our fiduciary duties.
Well, what a good segue into the letter that goes out with the budget.
Yes.
The trustees letter, that is a place that can be discussed.
Yes.
So, I mean, I can draft that as part of that letter and, you know, you all will take a look at it and see if there's anything you want to add.
And we also, I love the letter, love the footnotes. I think that people who read the footnotes are often the people who are maybe already aware of a lot of things about the library. Can we try to put that letter in another outlet? I say the spotlight because I think that it has become a place of some discussion about the library. You know, certainly I think we welcome other ideas of where to put it, but I love the footnotes are the best thing. But I also recognize that people are reading other things.
The answer is yes, we got you.
Thanks.
I think something shareable, social media. I don't know how many people read the spotlight, to be honest, but social media is so shareable, and that Bethlehem, New York Families page is very active, and I'm sure someone would share.
Well, the library has a social media
Yeah,
presence.
that's what, yeah. If we could turn it into a couple of
Oh, I
slides.
see what you're saying, if it's something,
And
or
then,
in
and then
another
it could
venue.
share, to various.
Hit everywhere.
Sorry.
That's okay, I was gonna say another point that we use to save money, which is important, is that we collaborate. We collaborate in Upper Hudson. And we also collaborate, you'll notice in some of the things that Jeff shows us that he's working through New York State OGS so that we get the state negotiated price for things that we purchase. Which I think is, we don't do it on our own. New York State has, it's so big, they do a lot of great negotiation for those prices. It might be a separate, I don't know if it should be the same one.
So, yeah, I think we'll put together, it's sounding like the theme of the trustee letter and the footnotes is about the fiscal responsibility and how the library and the board have managed the funds and taking up some of the things that you brought up. So I'll toss that draft out there, and if we want to slice and dice it or mix it into two, or, you know, add another one that just adds a little bit more, we can go from there. Is that? And I'm up against the wire, so you'll probably have a draft to look at by the end of the week.
When are the trustee petitions due?
Yep. April
April
21st.
21st?
Yep. So it's still time, but it's
March 10th.
March 10th now, so there's still time.
67 signatures, 61.
So does anybody have any questions about checks in the warrant, or any particular questions before we get a vote on the financial report?
I'll make a move to accept the, wait, we vote on this.
Yes, you got it. And we absolutely do. That was my
Okay.
question.
Michelle and Laura, all those in favor, or any discussion? Okay, all those in favor, signify by saying, raise your hand or saying aye, seeing opposition, that motion carries.
Like we forgot this.
Okay, so that's passed, so moving on to personnel report,
Okay.
page 17.
I have one action requested. I have a full-time librarian position that I'm seeking to rehire. It's just a one-for-one placement of that position.
In terms of salary, so if someone is entry level.
Yeah.
Right out of school, does that $60,000 go down?
No,
And if
that's
someone that is the entry level.
the entry level.
So what if you hire someone who has 5 years of experience?
So
on
in
other
the
lines? How does
CSE
that work?
Yeah, in the CSEA contract, but tipping my hand too much, but I'll tell you guys and who's watching, this is just a smart candidate. So, we have defined steps. That's the entry level for the position or per contract. So for instance, if someone was already inside and they promoted into this, which is unlikely but possible, we had someone in library assistant, they could come in on a higher step because they maintain their step if they're already an existing employee, or we have freedom to negotiate a certain range that's been pre-negotiated with the union about how high we can go up to recognize someone's experience if it becomes necessary to do so. That's Tracy and I discuss, what we think is appropriate, and that's how we move forward with that. And it depends, before the latest contract, there was an increase in those steps. We were more frequently using that during COVID when the labor market was so tight, we were negotiating a little bit more, less of that recently. So more often the entry level amount.
Okay,
That makes sense.
thanks.
Yeah.
So I would go ahead and fill that position.
Thanks.
All right, I need a motion on the personnel report. Gail, second. Laura, all in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye, motion carries.
Someone.
Thank you. And just because we have such a full agenda tonight, because I'm not going to drone on. I love talking about the library and all the great programs. You can read about them right there. Thank you so much. A lot of good work, a lot of good things are going on this month. We have heard people's complaints about the billing notice and how that language in the billing notice is a little bit hard. It comes centrally from the system, but it's, so we're using our patron point system to soften that up a little bit. So that's a source of complaint that I get fairly frequently. I did want to mention that we started the digital TU in another attempt to increase our digital holdings. Basically, we have online access to the TU. It's great. We were able to get that going. Yeah.
Can you scroll back up? The reports from the staff at the library was very busy.
Yes.
Is that borne out by any numbers? Because circulation appeared to be down, but what was the door count?
It was, but also remember, we were closed in February, we were closed for several days. It was a shorter month because it wasn't leap year. So we lost a day for February to February, right? It's 28 days versus 29. And we were closed for a couple of days. So actually the percentage of decrease in circulation
Was due to that, okay.
closer to that. I mean, I'm not gonna say, there's a lot of factors, but we're
That comes for like 2 days, 2.5.
2.5. It was, yeah, that's,
Like
I mean,
that.
it's, so there's 3 days out of a month, there's 10%, there's a 10% right there, right? So some people come the next day, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, yeah.
But, and one was on a weekend, which is particularly devastating this time of year because that. I think, yes, I think the people who were here were very busy. I think there are a lot of people who are coming in on the weekend, which I'm happy to see. The popularity of our Saturday story times, which we've tried for years to get going, is now great. This long, cold winter, there are not a lot of places to take little kids, and I think a lot of people are coming here as that option, which is wonderful, but it can lead to some very intense days. Do I think that's going to last throughout the year? How do we staff for that? We are in the middle of looking at those right now. So I want to give you a good answer to that. And we're going to be looking at that plus pre-pandemic, right? And a lot of, it's busier than it has been since 2020. How does that compare to the busyness of those similar months pre-2020? I would say the door count's still down a third.
Okay.
From pre-pandemic. So you know, how's that feel? What's that look like? But I think we need to look, we're gonna get down into the actually looking at the days rather than just like a month total, because if it is becoming spikier, like on the weekends now, the time, how will that look as soon as the weather turns, like today? But as soon as the weather turns, what's that gonna look like here on the weekends? We're gonna be watching that and trying to figure that out. So we're definitely hearing what people were saying, how busy it was here on the weekends, no doubt about it, but we've been busy before too, so.
I would be curious to see my shtick if Saturday has working parents that are finding a way to use the library outside of the hours they are at work.
I think,
Are you gonna be surveying or anything like that with that group?
so we were just talking about this exact thing, the folks that are bringing kids on the weekend do look as a group, maybe a little bit different than the weekday. Folks, the numbers are smaller, right? So, they're smaller than we get during the weekdays, but some of the parents are bringing them, and then sort of a request for, is it story time that's being sought, or the socialization of the parents and the socialization of the children, which are both extremely important things that we do, but is it a story time or is it some kind of other structured activity? I'm not the best person to talk about that, but I know the librarians are talking about that right now, is how do we meet, what is it that people are actually looking for? Are you looking for, a slightly sort of less structured, more socialization time? Or are you looking for a structured story time? It certainly seems that what's going on would militate towards a less structured thing on the weekends than maybe we get during the week.
People are just looking for something to do that doesn't cost money.
Correct, and it's a long, cold winter.
It's
this
been
year.
very,
It's been
very
a
cold.
long time since we've had a winter like this, so it's, post-pandemic, this is the first winter we've had like that. The spring has been super delayed, and kids are needing something to do on the weekends, and we're here to do that. Both, when I hear what people say, it shouldn't be, Chris, am I wrong? No, okay. So when people are saying it's not a play space, don't tell that to the parents who are coming here on the weekends. It's a play space, right? That is a goal, a sought after function that the library has, and we can either try to meet that or somehow unmeet that, when we're.
We had a great time here on Saturday. We were there for exactly that reason. We needed someplace to be. And I will say that the kid is more willing to learn how to play a card here than they are at home, because it's just different.
Was it super busy?
It was super busy.
Yeah.
Indeed. And, just in case, just public again, about space issues is that everyone was able to work it out, but people did have to figure out a table issue, making sure that everyone had tables to sit at in the children's area and do things like play cards or color or.
Right. It's a function, it's a role that we play
Yes.
that is needed in the community. Is the library the best position to do it? I think right now we are, because where else are we doing that? And, I take to heart comments like, where do the teenagers go? I understand, where do the little
I
kids go?
even mapped it.
Yeah.
Less than a mile,
Of
from
course.
middle school to they could walk that from, yeah.
That's why we're here.
The Carol's were there.
From McCarroll, sit down, here.
So Chris, I just want to toss that to you to make sure, am I saying anything that's wildly incorrect? Would you tell me, because it's the place to talk about that, it's a lot. So, sorry to take so much time, but that is important. And I think it's, we will monitor this to see whether this is a factor of the weather and the year and all that stuff, or is it our Saturday story times and the Saturday attendance going to just continue right on through the rest of the year? We'll find out. But we're taking it seriously, so.
See, library is open.
See, library is open.
One of my favorite things. Love the salsa kits.
So that is our new thing this year. They're all gone. All the salsa kits are spoken for. We had signed up for everybody. Boom. Super popular. That tells us for next year is the first time we've done that. The salsa kits are coming in an egg carton. And when they were getting packaged up, it did look like a little bit of a weird flex when we had like 144 egg cartons on the back of the information desk. Look at all the eggs. They're not eggs. It's seeds and little places to grow seeds. So.
You guys are hoarding eggs.
That's what I was just, people,
Reselling them.
myself included, but like every patron that came in was like, whoa. look at all these
eggs.
eggs," right, so,
Exactly right.
right, so, just great stuff going on, from the staff all the way around, the
Yeah.
outreaches, really good work, this partnership we have with Peregrine. And I'm finding myself doing it again. And just a reminder for everybody, April 7th, the next month's board meeting is a week earlier than it would normally be. Because we're avoiding the school spring break. And then, we did talk about our assisted technology, which I mentioned here again, that we have the hearing assist technology at all of information desks. We showed that off to the other Upper Hudson library system. Libraries to talk about how easy it is to get hearing groups installed at the service desks, in the library. That's it. And yes, circulation was down by this percentage. We looked exactly at that, and it's, the numbers are down, but the again, increases, even given that drop, the increases in electronic use, just, here we are. These, the e-audiobooks, just eventually, in a surprise to no one, CD audiobooks will, at some point in the future, cease to be a format that's gonna be effectively out in the library. Okay.
Having a big discussion with my husband about our VHS Star Wars series, which I like to toss. He thinks we should keep forever, even though we haven't looked at it in 10 years.
There are some VHSs you just keep forever. We want to have it on TV.
Well, you don't want to mess with by George Lucas, right? So that's a pre-messed with version.
Context, but I couldn't resist.
Super important.
Yeah, I sort of said, I went to the Victory Gardens reluctantly, and it was unbelievably good. It was a great,
I was there.
it was a great program.
The Historical Association.
The history
continues to
thing is awesome.
Knock it right out of the park,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
that's a great partnership.
Any questions on the treasurer's report or the numbers?
Lisa has to do.
I know. You just go-
On the treasure.
Or, no,
You mean
director's
on
report.
his?
Treasurer's report or the numbers that
Oh,
that's what I
gotcha.
meant. Page 20. Hearing no questions, okay, we'll move on to UHLS.
Not a ton to report other than we're feverishly trying to replace Tim Burke. His
Yeah.
last day is April 11th.
Wow.
The search committee has interviewed 2 candidates. I have not heard anything further than that. Perhaps on Wednesday I will find out. There is an open house reception for him on April 10th at their headquarters over there on Essex from 4 to 7. If anyone is interested in going, you're all welcome to. That's it.
I'll be there representing. maybe.
I mean, and the other
Been there
thing
a
is,
while. He's been-
15 years he's been there. And we did also approve the guidelines for the service committees for the annual program, so.
We did the same thing for the awards for the administration committee, so it's all-
No changes.
it's award season. Oscars for the library.
Yes.
All right, any questions for Lisa? Okay, going to new business. We have the draft budget on pages 25 and 26. For us, it's a lot less complicated because the pilot got extended for a year.
Right, I mean, and I know it's so complicated, and again, I'll play Sherry, I know she's talked to all of you. Via email, so that you have some verbiage already, but just that pilot has simplified everything amazingly. There's an article in the Spotlight that deals with the school district, very similar issue for the library. It's we get a proportionate share of those pilots, the school district gets the same ratio of our budget to their budget. The pilots are divided in a similar way, so having that pilot extender, even though it was on literally the next to last day that it could have been, I think John McPhillips expressed to the folks at the IDA and the GP2 that it would be best, in all of our best interest, if there's gonna be an extension, to get it negotiated sooner than the last day.
Yeah.
Because for our budget year, it's so last minute. I mean, and I apologize to all of you that there were so many versions of the budget that went out. It was just, that was the reality we were dealing with. We did not know there was gonna be a new version till the last minute. So this budget that is proposed has a levy that is well within the tax cap, well under the tax cap by $10,000 under the tax cap. And so that's good. So.
Make a motion to accept the budget.
I second it.
Caroline and Gail, okay, any further discussion? Okay, I'll call the motion, and all those in favor signify by saying aye, raising your hand. Seeing no opposition, that motion is carried, budget becomes the budget, not the draft budget.
We'll get that sent over to the school, sorry.
Awesome. A Better World Books.
Yeah, so this is just a picture of the Better World Book Fair, so that everyone knows what this is. The friends, the beneficiary of the funds that come from the Better World Books bin.
Did the bucket come with the?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, too, I had to move down.
Tony, sorry. I didn't hear.
No, it's
Yeah.
perfectly okay. It is a ridiculous thing. So the friends have asked me formally to ask you, they are going to pursue with their relationship with Better World Books, that they get a new bin. You can see from this, that this bin has been through the wars.
Yeah.
And there's a relationship that they have. There's some decisions they have to make about the revenue that they get. We dropped a little bit for a while to afford the new bin. At the same time, the friends said what we would really like is to have a second Better World Books bin, given that they understand the capacity of the friends to accept donations before their book sale, and it is the size that it is, relatively minor. That takes a lot of labor that the friends have to commit to accepting donations and filtering through those things, and they that capacity is difficult for them, and they would like to be able to offer a second Better World Books bin. If we were going to have a second Better World Books bin, the thing that the library has to decide on is, are you willing to give this parking spot over here over to a second bin? This is really the only place reasonably in the parking lot where the bins can be, for lots of reasons. I'm happy to talk about it. It's super boring, but this is the best place for the bin to be. It is also a great place for people to be. So I understand that there's, are you willing to give a second parking space to a second bin? Better World Books is willing to put another one there for them, if you want to give up a spot.
So I'm gonna ask, we've talked about this many
Yes.
times in the past. Can you put the bins in the back corner?
Not easily. It's not, everything's possible, but the truck that comes is quite large. It is difficult, especially when they're coming in the evenings, when the parking lot is full of cars, to make the swing around that back lot, the furthest section of the parking lot. So that's where, kind of would make sense for it to just be way back there. That's where the dumpster is, right? So our garbage dumpster is back there. But the garbage company truck comes way before we open, and there's no one else back there. So they're able to come in and actually work their way around, and they come out the other way, because there's nobody in the parking lot when they come. The control that we have over when the contracted company that doesn't, it's not even a Better World Books truck that comes, it's a totally different contractor. They contract with local haulers to come and empty this. In order to make the swing to get out of the parking lot, that's where we need to be. We could theoretically place them next to the book return bin on that side of that, but there's already enough confusion with people that they get confused between the Better World Books. But I would like a further separation between them, but really in our current parking lot, with the design of the parking lot as it is now, that's where it is. It is just unfortunate that it is also a great place
To park.
to park. So,
So I have two questions.
yes,
Is it possible to stack them or put one in front of the other and still only take up one spot? If this one comes forward and,
I gotcha. No, because you can see the door swings up from the side. It's like the whole front swings out. And then they have to have enough room to take the bin forward.
gotcha.
It's on a pallet jack, and you gotta have enough room to get the pallet jack over and then up onto the truck. So
Well, why couldn't they turn them?
they could turn them that way. You're still not gonna only, because see how wide the door is, bless you.
Yeah.
The width of the door, you'd still be impinging on that second spot. You're gonna lose some of that space.
And when are they here? They just,
They come when they come, typically Tuesday evenings and Friday evenings. Friday at like 5. That's when I see them typically come. So there's no doubt.
Go ahead.
No.
All right, so my other question was, can the bin be put elsewhere? Town hall, the park?
Well, it benefits the Friends group and that's.
I mean, possibly, though, because of how people treat this. There are reasons that there are fewer bin collection stuff around town, because it has to be managed, because people will inevitably leave tons of,
yes.
I'm gonna be gentle and say stuff out in front of the bin, yes.
What about the park and ride where the other bins are?
That's what you're talking about.
That's what you're talking about, and then it's gotta be managed, and that's,
Okay,
there's not a paper recycling thing down there now for
for
that.
that reason, sorry.
What about the driveway of the Borthwick property?
Possible, yep. We would be blocking Borthwick at a time around 5. That's not an awesome time to be blocking, so they would be pulling up. If it was,
So it couldn't be like at the end of the driveway, so the truck could pull in, do what it's gotta do and pull back out?
it's all possible, absolutely. So if that property was a parking lot, for instance, let's just say it was not a house and it was a lot. You could put whatever you wanted to there. So those are some possibilities to get it away. I would love it away for that exact reason. Just it causes confusion. There's not a lot of stuff. I would love to do that, though it would be difficult for the truck to swing out on Borthwick and back in. The truck drivers, they can figure it out. They're smart. They have a CDL license. So I think it's possible. All of those things are possible. It's right now, given what I have, under the circumstances that I have, I think that would be very difficult to make that work. So.
Do we need that parking spot? Is it gonna cause? I mean, I don't know how well the I've never had a problem parking here. So I don't know if that one spot is critical.
There are times when it's hard to park here. That's no doubt. It is episodic and not constant. The difficult part about this, and I don't want to undersell this, is that it's such a good, you can see right there,
It's a good-
there's the front door, right? So it is such a good parking spot that has become, absent the handicap spots, that's as close as or that you can get to the door.
So why don't you move the bins to the other side, farther away from the door in that same parking lot area? So that both of those spots are available to be close to the building.
Yep.
And the books are where you first pull in, maybe on the right-hand side, which is the farthest
Right.
spot.
That's the next best space. And it would involve the truck.
Would fully block the entrance.
Would call, you basically have to redesign that a little bit so that where the swing is, because most people come in, but doesn't matter. Yes, that is absolutely possible. The next most ideal spot would be that one.
That's what I think we should do.
Okay,
I mean, I think a second bin would be welcomed. I mean, it's a constant source of discussion.
I was just gonna say
Just
that.
a constant source of discussion. And it is a shame when people leave perfectly good books out and they get ruined and have to be thrown away. That is horrible. So, I mean, I think there's definitely a lot of need for
There
a
is.
second bin, and I think it would be a welcome change.
Well, and not just that people leave stuff out, which is so anger inducing. But like as a person who has dropped books off before, it's also anger inducing when I get here and it's full and I can't drop it, which has happened to me multiple times.
Yeah.
So like I say we get to.
Yeah, I definitely support it. And if investigating, I mean, I'm okay taking up that second spot or investigating.
I am too, but if it's an issue about being close to the building, then just.
okay, so I will,
How long does it take the truck to unload the bin?
they're here for 15 or 20,
15 or
15
20
minutes,
yeah.
yeah. And but again, it's about when they're here and it's not under control. So people imagine this like really well-oiled machine of these trucks coming. That is not, we do not have a lot of control over when they come. I can't place demands on them like that. The operation this is a low margin business.
I just wanna say, if I came and a truck was there, I'd probably come in the exit and then take the right up to go around the way.
Correct, and I don't love that,
I
so.
It's
dangerous,
That would be good. So that's an argument for leaving them where they
I
are.
was pulled in when the truck was there before and I just had to wait, or I could have backed up and parked in one of the other spots.
Yes.
You can usually shimmy around. mean,
I
that's
think
the-
I did eventually, should be.
They come over, they get
Yeah.
pretty far left, and then they can kind of do what they need to do. Okay,
I do remember when we polled the community on what are the top things you'd like to see changed about the library, parking was one of the top
Right.
three.
yeah,
So it is disappointing to lose a parking spot.
it is.
So I move that we give them a second space and Jeff can figure out where second space would be, whether it be next to existing or move farther away from the front.
Okay, there's a motion, any second? Laura,
Can I ask one more question though?
we're in discussion.
I know. Is it gonna be noisier? Is it noisy?
I
This
mean,
isn't
only as
like
much as there's a
garbage, right?
truck, there's some up and down of the back gate. They don't do any backing up, which is why you don't want it down the other front, there's no beep, 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 kind
And
of,
it's not early in the morning.
it's
like the-
not,
Like. the-
it's never, it has
Just
never been.
Thinking about the neighbors.
Fair enough, it is an
On
important concern.
Borthwick and not wanting to add to.
It's a metal bin. The thing, or sorry, it's a metal box, inside is plastic, but when you open the door, there's a certain amount of like, you know, as the thing comes out, and there's a lift gate in the back.
Right, but it's not like at 5 AM, like the garbage and things like that.
So
That was good sound effects,
It
Alex.
was.
Any other,
Just to clarify, the motion was to add a second bin in a different location.
Was to add a second bin and let Jeff determine.
Figure it out.
The location. Do you want me to say a different location? I'm happy to take that as a friendly amendment.
I just want clarification.
okay, in discussion, I think you should add, go to a different location, just for the record.
Okay, so then I take that as a friendly amendment.
Okay, there you go. So the motion is on the floor, has been duly seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Seeing no opposition, that motion is carried. Okay, train maintenance contract.
Okay, here it is, train maintenance contract. This is up for renewal renewal is a yearly contract, but when we enter an agreement, it automatically renews each of the 3 years of the contract. The 3 years are spelled out in the price of the contract, which I will roll down to here right now. These are the items that are covered under our preventative maintenance. The most important part actually of this contract is that it involves the updates and maintenance of the control system for the HVAC system. Like that's what the controls are by Train. Train is the proprietary software company for those controls. And then they also provide the preventative maintenance for all of these other pieces of equipment that are not Train, York and Controls, Square D, all these, well McLean for the boiler. So this is a yearly contract. It's above my authorization limit, so I'm not allowed to do that. It is under the bid limit for a public works, which is $35,000. So this is a board decision to do this in my proposal that we go with Train. We've been very happy with their service since the HVAC project. It's been years to work out to get a lot of the gremlins chased out of the system. We're not done with that yet, but it works very well compared to when we first went live with our HVAC system. So we were quite pleased with the service we got from Train.
I checked the increases and it's 4% between year 1 and year 2 and 5% between year 2 and year 3, which I think is quite reasonable. And in these fiscal times, I was happy to see that they had guaranteed price for 3 years. Because hopefully in 3 years, our fiscal situation in the US will have settled down, whatever ends up happening. So I would move to accept the contract.
Yeah, I have a question on, we're gonna do the discount. Piece on page 7, execute pay.
We can, I think, we paid this quarterly traditionally.
No, we've paid it once a year.
Okay, so we,
Usually in May,
and we get the discount.
and we get
Okay,
Yeah,
Good,
so
okay.
there you go. I mean, we got so yes, the answer is.
so motion on the floor to accept the contract, need a second. Second, Caroline, Gail and Caroline, any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying yes, raise your hand. Second opposition, that passes as well.
Thank you.
Annual report,
Yep,
this is
it's just a couple pages.
Don't worry, I have the same thing in the upper.
Yeah. Annual report for public libraries.
It's really fun.
So this is our New York State annual report. It represents the fiscal year that ended June 30th of 2024. So it's more than 6 months ago now, but that's the fiscal year that we report on, most of the report. Trustees are current, and then there's some stuff on the over times that's not under the same fiscal year, but that's all there.
I was wondering if you could talk about summer reading club statistics, which went down from previous years. And whether you guys are talking about them or whether you think there's a reason for that. The summer's traditionally a time that is the library for
Yes.
special programs.
Yeah, I think, I don't know, Chris, do you have it's something we definitely talked, summer reading club statistics, program statistics, and
Yeah, I think over the years, there's been a slow, steady decline in numbers. But that's also been the case of the number of students within the school district as well. Where they used to have an extra school, they closed the school down, maybe 6-7 years ago. Because of the declining numbers. But I do know that, the librarians are talking about more engaging ways to encourage kids to participate.
What is this year's summer reading theme? I apologize if I didn't put it on the notes.
It's Color Our World, so it's about like arts and painting and that sort of stuff is the theme.
Sort of popular programs.
Yeah.
So,
right.
maybe that.
I think in the summer, we're also competing with lots of other
Right.
things. And, it's just some of that's about the larger discussion about door counts, the physical use of the library building, the space, vis-a-vis checkouts, right? So that's, the digital checkouts, the digital offerings we have. There's a larger discussion to be had there. I won't hijack all of this. This is a recognition of the past. This report, but it is a good time to.
Yeah, I'm happy to hear you're discussing it because the statistics say that our kids are interested in reading.
Yeah.
And reading in the summer is really critical.
Right. No, and we filled that space for years, and
So I'm happy to hear you're discussing.
yeah.
Any other questions on the annual report? Can I take a motion to approve it? Laura, second.
I'll second.
Sarah, all those in favor signify by saying yes. Seeing no opposition, that motion is carried. Room rental contract on page
91.
91.
All right, so we're still under this. We have a hop on that, fantastic. So this is just a piano recital, again, the most normal of our room rental situations, a piano recital, maximum number of attendees under the allowable limit that we have maximum for the room, and under the same $25 an hour we've been charging for standard rate for room rentals, where there's not any complicating issues that would involve an increased expense, so.
Just have like a question that.
Yeah.
Again. But how do we handle insurance for an individual? They don't have to. Do they have to have insurance? She's just an individual, because the contract says.
You can be, it depends on,
Organization.
right, it's gonna depend on the organization, it's gonna depend on the nature of the program, what was being done in here, this is.
Just making sure.
This is largely, is a very normal thing, that we have piano recitals here all the time, it's a very normal thing, it's just under, it's obviously a company, right, so the piano recital is a company, it doesn't fit in our normal.
It is a company, I didn't.
Well, it's not a nonprofit.
Right.
This is a
Okay, but
person
it's
who's teaching
Gotcha.
piano they're having a recital, right? So it was always, piano recitals were specifically always allowable because the board traditionally saw the service as to the kids in the school and their opportunity to perform for the public.
Mhm.
And that's why that was carved out and it's been in our public meeting policies, all the versions of them for all those years, because it's a recognition that this is a space, you've got the piano and like little kids have an opportunity to.
No, I wasn't questioning that. It was more, is it a person who's just doing this, or
Correct.
is she a business? That's what I'm.
Correct, I think it's, yes, it's a person who's teaching piano lessons, whatever organization that is.
I'll take a motion on this. Room rental.
Do we need a motion on this?
It needs to get reported, we've been authorizing these each time, we had a discussion, we'll talk about that in policy committee about
Okay.
That actually was gonna be my question,
Yeah.
and I was gonna say, and I apologize if we've already discussed this before, but
Yeah.
maybe we're about to discuss it. I just wonder why the board needs to do this.
We're not going to have to anymore.
Okay.
Correct, but it was such a, this is a brand new thing under a brand new policy, so when we were looking at this is only the second or third time we've done this. We wanted to have that discussion, make sure the board was aware, because it was a new contract, it's a contract, right? So the board is seeing all these things, and we'll talk about that during the policy. For now, this is the process we've got.
Make a motion to accept the rental contract as presented.
Carolyn, Gail, second, all in favor, signify by saying yes, raise your hand. So in opposition, that motion is carried as well. Thank you. Friends of the Library resolution.
Okay, so also about our meeting policy, under that, there are restrictions for lots of uses that the Friends of the Library currently or in the past have undertaken, such as the book sale, right? That's not something that we would allow any other organization to do, absent a separate agreement. And while I feel it's a good idea for us to have a more formal MOU that is a little bit more comprehensive about the relationship between the Friends and the library, that's great. But for now, because we're coming up on book sale season, they use additional meeting spaces more than one in a month, unlike other organizations. And they also do, in keeping with their mission, collect money on the property, which we don't allow anybody else to do in the policy. So to make sure everybody's covered, the Friends and us, we just want to make sure that we have this resolution in place. It says right in the policy that we'll have an agreement or a resolution with organizations that want to do anything outside of our policy, and they'll be available for review. So this is the most public that we can make an agreement. Like I said, this is sort of in anticipation of a more fully negotiated MOU between the library and the Friends.
Do you have insurance?
Do they have? They absolutely have insurance. Yeah, both liability and directors and officers and all of that.
So I'll make a motion to accept the Friends of the Library resolution.
I'll second.
Okay, Michelle, Sarah, all those in favor, signify by yes. I see no opposition, that motion is carried.
It's not, that
Oh,
is
sure.
not nothing to affect this,
Yeah,
but
sure.
like I've seen some other local Friends of Libraries hosting like fundraiser at the library is closed except for ticketed
Yep.
people at the library. And I was just wondering if that's something that would be allowable for
Well,
our friends, like if they wanted to do a fundraiser, say for the Celtic or something.
Yeah.
Just, okay.
correct. I mean, if
I
we
mean, I
were
was
gonna-
surprised that they closed the library to the public, because that feels a little strange.
So in the past, and again, it hasn't been done in other libraries I've worked in where the Friends have done that. What typically happens is you would, in our instance, we would do it on a Saturday evening. So you would close the library at 5 and at 6 o'clock you'd have, so we're closed anyway.
Gotcha.
But there are libraries that don't do that way. There are, it can be how the library is organized. Fundraising can be a more direct, if they're not a government library, fundraising is a more important part of their total budget. And so they will absolutely close on a regular working night.
Maybe it was after their hours.
Yeah.
I wasn't thinking of library closed at 5.
But it happens, yeah, it happens a lot. We've done a couple of events in the past, mostly they've been author talks, we would close the library and then we back up for like Chris Bogelli. And then we had people in the library.
They used to do like a gala of sorts.
Our Friends have never done a gala. This has been discussed as a gala, a tea, lots of other things. It's all possible. That takes a certain amount of capacity for our Friends to do. Our Friends are being very successful right now, running the 2 annual book sales and the bus trips as their primary fundraisers. And they're, they're being very successful doing that. And with the capacity that the Friends group has right now, I think that hopefully that continues to build. It's certainly built from where it was in the past, which is great. And they stand ready to make a significant donation to the library should there be a project that is appropriate for them to. So, yeah, it's a thing that a lot of libraries do. We could do, we haven't done because,
Some boards do it too.
yeah,
Yeah,
There's a gala that's widely publicized though, and I think it's at Altamont. Cause I did just.
Yes, Altamont has a gala, Albany has an authors.
Well, they have a foundation.
Yeah, they have a foundation. so-
I still follow them because I used to administer that Facebook page.
There's lots of different ways to charter libraries and do libraries, and they can do all sorts of events.
Okay, Spotlight Archive.
Okay, so all of you have a packet in front of you, and I believe it was emailed to the exact same packet was emailed to you before with a few minor changes. I just wanted to have a discussion here. This particular patron was requesting that a individual picture and their name be redacted from the Spotlight archive online, right? So the individual feels strongly that having the picture there and the name there is harming them. And we have come across this question as a board, and maybe not everybody here has, but it was an important time to bring this up. And I'm sorry to make this meeting longer. This is an important thing to discuss. In the past, when people have approached us, it has been about removing the desire to remove mostly criminal related things, DWI or some kind of thing. The Spotlight used to have a much more a different approach to how they reported those things, and they're in the archive, right? So they're on searchable, Google searchable, on our website. And there was movement because of the sort of related to the ban the box and a lot of other information to sort of say, hey, we're not here to harm people long term. This board has made decisions in the past to say, we're not going to remove the Spotlight archive is what it is, and we hold that archive in place. So there has been some evolving understanding. I think currently we are well within our, legally well within that to hold that archive whole and not remove anything from it. There could be changes in case law going forward, but not yet. There are also cases where people are talking about stalking. There's stalking situations, and there's all of these things that can come up. That's not, I believe, part of what the information I've been given from this. So it's a simple request that actually is more complicated and a little bit more serious than it can seem at first. So it's a question more about our approach. Is it that it has been our desire, and other boards have affirmed in the past, that we keep the archive whole as it is? Is that something we wish to continue to do going in the future? Do you want more information on this? I know this is a very full meeting, but we have a request from a member of the public right now, so I didn't want to not bring this up to you. But it is an important question as we.
We are custodians of that newspaper. We do not own that newspaper, correct?
That is correct. We have.
So if we are custodians, we have no power to remove or change any of the content. If she wants to pursue it, she needs to pursue it with the Spotlight,
But
correct?
no, close,
Why
but
not?
not, because we don't. This isn't a service that we contract with the Spotlight with to provide, like we do with the Times Union Archive or the New York Times Online. Those are services that we purchase that are administered by those places. We are the actual host with permission of the Spotlight. We have an written agreement with the Spotlight to be the host of this. It's not a service we buy. It is a thing that we do because we are the owners. We're not the owners. The Spotlight's the owners. We are in fact the custodians of these digital files. They are on our server. They are our scanned documents.
So if you have a historical document.
Yeah.
You need to have the agreement that you have been
Correct.
given the document.
Yeah.
But you don't have an agreement to change the document. That's not part of what it's about. The content of the document comes from the Spotlight. Like, I would love to take off all those bad letters about the library that have been on there in the last year, but we have no power to change that content. We have no power to change misquoting or other things that happen. So as an archival thing, it's not within our authority or power to take any pictures. In my library, this is me speaking as a librarian from the archives point of view.
Yes, I agree with you.
Yeah.
The question is, there is a difference between having a document like we did for years, bound newspapers, in the library on a shelf, putting them online and making them keyword searchable changes the nature of that object, right? And I agree with you. My position has always been, we shouldn't be messing with this archival document, but it is something that could come up, you know, and if it's not this particular situation, there are things that could come up, like I said, a stalking situation or something like that, where it's gonna be harder to keep to that. We absolutely.
But in that case, they would have to come with a court order. I'm just saying it's not within the library's purview to make the decision to remove or change archival content. If she goes to the FBI and the FBI comes to you with a court order to remove the picture, then you have no choice but to remove the picture. But I don't believe it's within the library's purview to make that decision. If someone is stalked and they can get a court order or to remove whatever it is they want removed, that is a different kind of interaction. It's the same as if someone came and said, there's been a bomb threat, we want to see who's been using the public computers. If we don't do, I'm assuming we do not do that unless they come in with a court order requesting to see the computer use, and I'm also assuming we wipe the computers every night.
That is correct.
When they shut down.
Right.
It's exactly the same.
What? Okay, so
In my opinion.
I'm sorry.
No,
Because it is. It's similar, it's based in some of the similar principles, but we are protecting patron confidentiality on one hand, and then protecting the integrity of the archival document on the other, right? Which may or may not be in tension with protecting the privacy of the individual person. Our board has looked at this 2 or 3 times in the past since we put it up. It is a question that comes up. I just think it's important because everybody's understanding of this a little bit keeps changing. I thought I saw a trend in some of the court rulings, but so far it hasn't panned out yet. I just want to bring it up in a serious way to have a real discussion about it. Your position is what the board has affirmed in the past, and I just wanted to have a check-in with this particular, because it's not a request for reconsideration, but it's a close cousin to a request for reconsideration of this particular work, and I wanted to bring that up here because it for discussion. So.
I was just gonna say, I mean, I don't think the request is that we edit the archive, right? Not like remove the photo, you could just remove
Let's remove the issue.
the issue itself, right? I actually think we should maintain the archive in whole. Okay, but to your point, it's not really the request. The request isn't that we, modify the newspaper record. It's to just not have that record be available, which is a little bit different in my mind. Like, I think there's less of a problem with just removing a record than trying to alter a record. But
if we remove it, I would want to see, I would want to see a paper copy in the library archives.
Right, we're gonna digital copy.
Not a digital copy, a paper copy or printing out, so that it's not accessible on the internet, but there's other things in that issue that someone might want to research. So here's my example, to go back to my library stuff. Voorheesville, there was a woman named Lillian Smith who owned Smith Taverns in Voorheesville. She kept a diary of every single person from Voorheesville who participated in World War II, and she kept their letters. We got, when I was director, a gift of that material. Turned out that some of the letters contained abusive issues, drunken and abusive descriptions of people who lived in the village at that time. So the choice was to not digitalize it, to have the records, to keep the records available if someone wanted to come in and see them, but not make them universally available. So if we do take an issue down, I would still want to see that issue be accessible in case someone wanted to come and look at it.
And we would maintain that in some way, whether it's digital or physical, we would have it here in the building available. It's just, and there doesn't have to be any action to it, right? So I have votes from past boards that are my clear guidance right now. Absent that decision, that's what I will move forward. But I wanted to give this request its appropriate consideration because it is it's indicative of an issue that I don't think is not going to come up more in the future. We're going to continue to get these as we move forward.
Well, so can I just say, as a historian
Yeah.
who has utilized archives many, many times, I am not at all for removing things from an archive. Um, So I would not be agreeable to that, but I also think that unfortunately, we're in changing times and we may sooner than later come up with other directives that we can't control, but for right now, I say we leave things in the archive.
I think we all kind of concur with the same conclusion, maybe for different reasons, or at least most people who've spoken, I concur. But just a process question, right now, like a reconsideration, that is the director's decision to start,
Correct.
and the board then would consider an appeal of it. But you're bringing it up for discussion today to discuss kind of our approach to it.
One was asked specifically to be brought to the attention of the
Okay, so
board,
this
which
is-
kind of, it doesn't jump the process. I have my decision because we have discussed this in the past. My decision is going to be to keep this in the archive. But I think it's important that you're all aware of that. And given the explicit nature of the request to present this to you as a board, I think that was important. So,
Would this, just a process question?
Yep.
Would this person maintain the right of appeal or?
absolutely,
Okay.
yeah, because it's my decision right now based on past guidance that I've got from previous boards. It may well show itself back up to you, but for now, you know, this person's watching, they're gonna get a secret inside information to what my decision's gonna be. So it's important. This is an important thing, and I appreciate the conversation.
And one would assume that at the time that the picture was taken, there was approval that the picture could be printed.
Well, it's news, right? So you don't have to have approval for news. It's news, right? And that's you're getting exactly at all of these. It's much more complicated than it kind of can seem right at the surface. It's, you know, are we changing the
Unless
nature?
it's involving children that, well, you know,
Well, even
that's the thing you sign with your school district that allows them to use.
correct, but if you're in a park and at times
There's
And-
no expectation
Of privacy.
privately in a public setting.
correct. So if someone takes a picture,
However, as a general practice, it's good to get consent. We have the state, we have to get a model consent for
Well,
children.
this appears to be a posed picture, not just something
Yeah,
it does
taken
appear to be
randomly on the
does.
street.
And then everyone singing, you might want their picture in the paper.
Agreed, it doesn't, it's a long time ago,
well, and this is the stage of the spotlight when we did the black and white, because that was the cheapest way to scan. It was a stretch for the Friends to fund the scanning of the spotlight, and they couldn't do it in full grayscale, so we did it in black and white. So you see the picture is not
Yeah.
the clearest, which is a disappointment for some people. The newer versions are, we receive the actual digital version of the spotlight comes right to us, so it's that changes when those episodes change. And this will be something that our library will deal with 10 years from now and 20 and 25 years down the road. There you go. So thanks. I appreciate the careful discussion tonight.
Well, and I would just add real quick in case, you know, we end up in an appeal process, barring any legal directives, I think we should maintain accurate representation of the paper. So that's quite a few people around the table.
Yeah, no, I think
Yeah.
we've got it, and that's been affirmed by this board and previous boards. It just is, it's an important thing to discuss, but I appreciate it.
We also know in the spotlight, there's other library issues. The spotlight article.
Yeah.
The spotlight says, so.
Yes, no,
Fascinating.
but if you search the library, the spotlight is,
It's been there.
you will see how much things do not change.
Okay, great. UHLS board member. We have to have a new one, right?
We do. So Lisa has been, it's,
Well, wait,
yeah, right,
you have to be a board member, Lisa.
I know, I was told that, I'm like, no, there'll be somebody interested.
Okay,
fair enough. So, just by coincidence, what happens is that your term of our board and the term of your position on the Upper Hudson board both happen to end on exactly the same day, which is June 30th, 2025. So, before the May meeting of the Upper Hudson board, we need to have the Bethlehem Public Library is on basically the Security Council. We always have a member that represents our library on the board of the Upper Hudson Library System. Not everybody does, just the sort of mostly the larger libraries. So we have to have somebody down there as part of our agreement with Upper Hudson and our participation. the changing nature of the rules is that it does not have to be a seating board member. It has always been a seated board member for us in the past. So there is a description of that, which I think you sent out to everybody about the sort of the time commitment of the board, Lisa, you can speak cogently about that. If anybody has questions, but we
When did you send that out?
I didn't check.
Maybe
Maybe
it's
we
out
did,
of my
uh,
mind.
Okay, yeah. Mark and I were emailed by the
Yeah,
director.
I will send that out. I thought I did that, but things are a little.
But Lisa, you can talk about the time commitment right now, and we're here, so if you want.
You've been on the board for a while, so you.
10 years.
Right,
Right. And I don't think it's as urgent as it has to happen May 1st, because when I took over, you remember,
I do.
I took over for somebody who lost the election. So and that certainly happened with other libraries that have named seats, like Guilderland and Colony and those are kind of the three big, and Albany is the other one. I mean, the time commitment is mostly a monthly meeting, depending upon, you also have a committee meeting, a committee that you have to sit on. It's either finance, services, or administration. Financial meeting before, just the way we meet here. The other ones are not every month. So, but there are definitely times of the year that are busier for those committees. I've been on the services committee the entire time I've been on the board, and that's all the construction grants and the program awards, and those take up a lot of time, I will tell you.
But that's also, I mean, so I serve on the administration committee as the representative from the Directors Association. That time committed is much less, but the services committee, because of those construction grants, is the most important.
Yeah.
All the committees are important, but that committee has a lot of work because it deals with how we dole the money out from New York State for construction grants. It's an important place to have a voice, so.
And then there are months that typically don't have a monthly meeting. So sometimes in the middle of the summer, and also sometimes in December, they don't. The unfortunate part is that the meeting starts at 4:30.
So we're talking about, it's like.
And I have tried to get them to change it for the whole time I've been on the board, and it was unsuccessful. So, when I was working still, I had to go to it, and they have no virtual attendance at their meetings. They do not video anything. So
That might change with a new director now.
possibly, but it's a 4:30 meeting. It's usually over by 6. That's about it.
I've now sent it out to all you guys. Yeah, the 4:30 thing is, I was gonna ask about, is there any flexibility?
There really hasn't been. I mean,
Okay.
I will say in terms of the experience on it, it gives you a much broader view of libraries across the Capital District and how different they really run, and how lucky we really are to have the kind of library we do for all the issues that we run into. I honestly, and not speaking out of term, I'd rather have some of the issues we deal with than, who's gonna bake the cookies, so. But I think if it's something that you're interested in from a broader perspective of library service, it's really worthwhile to go and participate and be involved.
Thank you, and thank you for serving so long.
Yes, thank you.
It's important for
At least it
us.
was 10 years. That's great.
Yeah, she got dragooned.
Exactly. Okay, people should look at the email I just sent, also thinking a little bit more, but I apologize for just sending it now, but a lot of things going on. Other new business? No new business? No. Any new business? Okay, old business. Policy committee update.
Quick update.
Okay.
Okay, we made 3 changes at our last policy committee meeting. We're still working through the actual text of the agreement, but think these are just basic technical changes. The first one is that the room checkout process where an individual is checking out a room. That room capacity on that has been changed from 25,
Hasn't been changed yet.
and will be changed.
It's gonna be proposed to be changed as before it comes back.
I'm so sorry. You are right, Jeff. I
Right.
should rephrase.
Right.
The changes that we will be bringing to the board include a change from, in the room checkout process, from capacity of 25 to 35. So upping that 10. The second proposal will be briefly brought up earlier, is that the facility contracts will no longer come to the board, is that they will be within Jeff's discretion, and that he would provide notice to the board each time there is a facility contract. And the third thing is, I don't know if this is necessarily in the policy or if this is more of a technical change, the electronic signature, which is the acknowledgement form. People have to come in and sign. We are looking to make that an electronic signature, which would hold up under New York State law. We just have to come up with the logistics of that. And then just a point for the public and a point that we're trying to figure out how to remind people of gracefully is that if you are the room checkout person, if you have checked out a room under your card, please be there when the room checkout is taking place. It can often be worked out, but it causes a number of some additional administrative effort if the card holder is not there.
And people need to check in before that room checkout at the information desk, which seems to be a challenge, but
Correct.
we're working that through.
But we anticipate those changes. Can we take a vote tonight on those theoretically, or do we?
No,
need to have
because
a vote?
there's some practical, I need to make sure the software can handle it and then get the technical language in the policy. And then that's what we'll come back to, but I think we're sort of at consent.
But those are the changes that will be coming to you for your consideration.
So we recently heard from an HOA,
Yeah.
would increasing to 35 address those concerns?
No,
No.
I mean, I asked that question. Well, I think I asked that question. That's not a response, but I was gonna bring up the HOA issue. That's an issue that's come up a couple times, especially recently in writing. But we may want to talk about whether we have an exception for the HOAs or not.
Very expensive.
I know, that's what I told her.
All half a half.
I told her, yeah. It just came up though. I mean, it's definitely.
Yeah, I mean, we've had a couple organizations that have been looking for exceptions for their organizations, so.
I mean, I think it's an.
Arts people, HOA. That's
But those groups could do it under the rental.
Yes.
Absolutely.
That's
Which
correct.
is $25 total or $25 an hour?
It's $25 an hour.
Which comparatively to some of the other places in town that offer room rentals,
Super cheap.
it is significantly lower.
I do understand that, but compared to before this policy was created and it was free, $75 for a 3-hour meeting, it might be cost prohibitive for certain groups.
I absolutely understand, and that's where we're working out the details of this policy. We continue to, we have significant challenges with the administration of it. We're trying to address some of those concerns. Some of the biggest challenges are those exact expectations where people are like, I know, we're not organized as a nonprofit. I know there are other groups that are having larger meetings than we're allowed to have,
So the rental fee is to take care of maintenance afterwards, right? Like cleaning, custodial, that kind of stuff.
That's what that's what the fee is based on, right? It's based on the sort of what's the median cost of just the salary for that. We had to base it on something, that's what we based it on, but really it's what your rental, because the board has said, if you live in Bethlehem and you have a Bethlehem Public Library card, you can check out the room right now for 25 people. You can have that, it is your room to just check out like a book, right? The board has said that. The board had also said for recognized nonprofits and all the 3 methods that you could be a recognized nonprofit, those organizations, in recognition of their status as nonprofits, you can have a larger meeting up to 65 people. And then if there's else, if you are not a registered nonprofit, there is another mechanism, and this mechanism is this rental agreement.
Yeah, I think the policy committee did discuss this very issue of and we brought up the issue of the HOA, and there are very few instances in which a meeting is going to go over 35 people. Is that, you can bring in 65, that's set up for nonprofits. That also rarely happens, go to 65, but sometimes it does. Most situations can be dealt with by the room checkout. I mean, 35 people in a room, that's a big crowd, that's a pretty big event. So the outlier events are pretty minimal.
And it's not, we don't take this without consideration because it's gonna add another layer of confusion because in this room, it's just 25 people.
Yeah.
Because that's the capacity of the room. So this would have to be only for the community room. So it is unfortunately another layer of complexity for the people who are approaching us and want to use a room, right? So that's absolutely the crux of what we're dealing with right now as a library and the public is how are people able to navigate this appropriately in order to use the rooms? So.
Okay, any other updates from the policy committee? Okay, moving on to other old business. No other old business? Future business? Okay, any public participation?
Yeah, a couple comments. First, in regard to the spotlight issue, I don't know if you've looked at what some European countries have done in terms of a right to digital privacy, but you haven't looked at that, so that is something to consider. In regard to the policy committee issue, I still think remains a significant issue, and I've expressed it as best as I can in my writing, and I have not been told where I'm wrong in my thinking, and I would welcome being told where I'm wrong because I think the policy has a significant defect at this point, and I've suggested ways I think that it can be improved and that can be addressed. I quite frankly I don't understand why it's not being addressed. The other thing I wanted to mention, and this is I don't have comments prepared on this. I fully respect the way you operate in terms of running board meetings and the rules and so forth that are followed. But I really think I was frustrated tonight because I felt it was a lost opportunity. I think it's important to build public support for whatever you're going to be doing, including the repairs and maintenance issues and so forth. And we had an opportunity here tonight where schoolhouse people were coming in with defective information, yes, but they were coming in with information about proposed repairs. And one person sitting in front of me had a question which was not allowed, and I understand why that was. I think maybe a possible solution would have been, or maybe could be in the future, to have this kind of a discussion, but to allow public participation in it, to allow people to raise questions and issues about proposed repairs or actions that are maybe going to take place. I had a couple of questions that I would have loved to have asked CJ about. And they were not challenging, they were just really clarifying. And I think sometimes that the misinformation that appears in letters to the Spotlight and other places is a result of the inability of public members to fully engage with the board as you're discussing certain issues. And I really wish that you would find ways to deal with that. Okay, and one final unrelated thing, and following up on something Gail said. During the course of the building project, there were surveys taken and people responded. And two of the issues that came up were, I'm just going to finish this off, were to make improvements to the children's library and also to the meeting rooms. And they went down more or less to defeat because the bond unfortunately did not pass. But I think rather than abandoning those areas at this point, I think it would honor and respect members of the public who made those suggestions. And those were two of the most popular areas, to determine if there are reasonable, low-cost improvements that could be made to the children's library, to the meeting room. If they're not possible at low cost and they have to rule them out, I understand, and that would happen. But I think it would be useful to examine those areas. That's it, thank you.
Thank you. Any other public perspective? Okay, so we're gonna move to executive session. Motion,
To vote to enter executive session to discuss, for the purposes of discussing the employment history of a particular individual.
yeah.
And I second.
motion, Sarah with a second. All in
So-
favor, signify by saying yes.
Excuse me. Is somebody gonna kick my husband out if he sits outside? He said the library's closing.
It's closing in 25 minutes. If the executive session goes on 25 minutes.
Do you want some?
He can watch the kids, cause they'll get kicked out.
Yes, by over two.
Okay.
So,
Mine isn't, everyone else's is much longer than mine.
Jack,
No, it's fine. I looked at it.